So it's a very special day today. Today that this episode releases.
Would you say it's a day that lives in infamy, Brian?
I would say it's our most solemn day.
Yeah.
Until later when it became our second most solemn day after Good Friday.
Right.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. Between the 1941 attack on Pearl Harbor and today, there was this carpenter who showed up. And like, what if he was born? Okay, but like, what if he was born in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania?
I don't know. Like, what if?
And then like, what if he was in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, growing up? Like,
bro, that's
like
a crazy ass thought.
Maybe he like made cheeses.
I don't know if the world is ready for this.
Wait. Okay, so hold on. I need to get this straight.
No, we're getting, because between that point and now, that guy died.
Okay.
It was on a Friday.
Yes.
And we call it Good Friday. And it's like
ironically?
What, you mean good?
Yeah.
No, it's because his death was our salvation.
So it's good for us, not good for him.
Yeah, because he actually had a lot of slaves and we had to kill him to set them free.
Whoa.
The slaves were us. I was the slave. I was the slave to
God. That guy like took over the whole
Nope.
country. Everyone forgot what happened in the 70s, but it was bad.
Okay, wait. I need to be very clear about this. In your ranking, it's number 1, Good Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 2, Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Number 3, 9/11?
You mean Patriots Day?
Oh, Jesus.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah, it's Patriots
That's
Day.
fucking funny.
Yeah. Not to be confused with St. Patriot's Day, the holiday from Tom Goes to the Mayor.
See, I thought you were going to say that today is a day that is very special because it is the day that SpaghettiOs posted a picture of a SpaghettiO waving an American flag, letting us know that we will never forget the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
And people got mad at that. Like, people are so unpatriotic now that they got mad at Hiram SpaghettiO. Who's part of the very long old SpaghettiO wasp family the Massachusetts SpaghettiOs. That's who he is.
It's weird. They still like have their whole like compound on Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
Today we celebrate Pearl Harbor.
After they kicked out Chef Boyardee.
I think the worst thing about Hiram SpaghettiO, well, he's dead now. I think the worst thing about
Hiram SpaghettiO Jr. who's running it now.
I think the worst thing about Hiram SpaghettiO Jr., who also made that tweet, is the way that he also has been really aggressively trying to rehabilitate Alan Dershowitz's reputation.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
No. I mean, like, he's not in the black book, but there is a number that belonged to one of his former receptionists.
I guess my question about the original Hiram SpaghettiO is that when he was shot outside the Texas Book Depository, did it just go through the circle in the middle of him?
Yeah. I mean, he famously did not die or even get injured on that day.
He was
Texas.
eaten mere moments later.
Weirdly, that was like 3 months before John F. Kennedy was killed from the Book Depository.
Yeah.
Like, that book depository has killed so many people.
Yeah, it will kill again.
Yeah.
It must be stopped.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the worst of all possible worlds, the first and only podcast that has killed and will kill again. I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
And I'm the worst of all possible Bryans, enjoying my nice big cold can of SpaghettiOs.
Okay, so here's
with
what's
meatball.
You know what's really sickening?
cold?
Yeah.
I actually do eat cold SpaghettiOs from the can sometimes.
Yeah, I did that when I was a child. I don't do this as an adult.
I know, I still do it. I'm a sicko.
okay.
We're back, obviously, for another case study in the pop culture of a dying empire.
Yep.
And this week, we decided, because it is Pearl Harbor Day, to repeat our now annual tradition of doing episodes about Pearl Harbor.
I hope you're ready. We're going to do this for the rest of time.
As long as this show exists, we're going to talk about Pearl Harbor every year.
We must run out of it eventually, right?
You'll never run out of Pearl Harbor
there's
media.
so much Pearl Harbor. And like, we're not going to be around that long. Come on.
I was talking to my mom about this, and she was recommending, like, I guess Lois Lowry, who wrote The Giver. She wrote a children's book about Pearl Harbor that we could read.
Fucking way.
There's so many options. But
oh God.
I like Lois Lowry.
This time around, again, back to the point of sickos, we've decided to watch fucking
Lois Griffin.
Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor. And
oh, Peter the Giver.
Was watching Pearl Harbor my idea? Because if so, I apologize.
Yeah, this one was you, Josh.
Okay,
I feel like it was also partly me. Maybe that's just my constant need to like take attention and or blame for things. Right. But like I was immediately hard when we mentioned doing this.
Yeah.
I have never seen this movie. I just remember it coming out and it was like this other kind of girly movie about a historical tragedy, right? They did Titanic. Titanic was this weirdly huge hit where like it didn't catch on immediately, but then it stayed in theaters for like a full fucking year because people kept going to see it.
That's James Cameron. He only makes hits.
Yeah.
Well,
very excited for Avatar, The Way of the Water. We're gonna go see that.
I forgot about The Abyss.
We all gonna go see The Way of the Water? What?
No.
Oh yeah, that's right. The Abyss didn't make it.
So, you know, like studios, especially Michael Eisner's Disney / Touchstone Pictures, really wanted to replicate the success of that. And so they're like, what's the next thing we can do? 9/11 hasn't happened yet.
Right.
So
it would happen pretty soon after, dear listener, which makes watching this movie very interesting in retrospect.
So
DVD sales for Pearl Harbor spiked after 9/11.
Really?
Because
That's
in
weird.
Michael Bay's own words, it was cool to be patriotic again.
and then they watch the movie and they're like, why did I fucking buy this?
3 hours.
It's so long and it's again, they're just trying to do Titanic. They're trying to do what Titanic did. So they have mostly fictional characters, one like real guy that's sort of one like sort of, you know, in the same way that like Kathy Bates was Molly Brown.
Right. The Cuba Gooding Jr. character, you mean, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why isn't the movie about him?
Well, we'll get to that. But
you think that maybe there could be a good movie about Dory Miller? Maybe?
You think?
Yeah. He has an arc and there's 3 scenes.
It's insane.
Yeah.
But
and he should be played by a better actor.
We should talk, though, about Michael Bay a little bit before we dig into talking about the movie itself, because
this movie came off the hits, like the almost consecutive hits of his 2 movies that are now in the Criterion Collection.
Yes. Which we will probably be covering on Fancy Movie Time at some point.
The Rock, which is fantastic. The other one, of course, being Don't Want to Close My Eyes.
I always forget that Armageddon's in the Criterion Collection. That's fucking wild to me.
I don't know who made the decision, but they made it, and so here we are. It's just so that we can say it.
It is a culturally significant film. You can't argue that it's not.
I mean, that's the truth, is that Michael Bay is actually a very culturally significant director. I hate that. I hate that with every fiber of my being.
Yeah.
You watch his movies, and what's interesting about like researching his life is that Michael Bay is exactly who you think he is.
Yeah, man. There is nothing about that man under the surface.
No.
He is right there in front of you.
I believe friend of the show Patrick Willems once referred to him as the himbo auteur, and I can't disagree with that.
Well, and I think, the last 10 years we've seen some more like unusual stuff from him, like Ambulance, which I haven't seen, and Pain and Gain, which is like a legitimately fascinating movie.
Right.
But like the 90s, he was just the guy who did the style the best.
So I got some facts about Michael Bay, if we want to dive deep into the Bay.
I am strapped in.
So this is...
Or the harbor, even.
So a lot of this information comes from this article, An Oral History of Michael Bay, the most explosive director of all time, by Sean Fennessy. It was done by GQ.
Oh, boy.
And so Michael Benjamin Bay, the prodigal son of L.A.
That means Michael, the son of Bay.
Benjamin Bay. The prodigal son, I don't know. That's a Sweeney Todd.
Yeah,
just for me.
I got it.
Oh, boy.
Michael Benjamin Bay was born in 1965 and raised in the Valley by his adoptive parents, Harriet and Jim Bay, a child psychologist.
Valley?
The Valley of L.A.
Oh, you don't know what the Valley means.
You don't know what the Valley is, Josh?
Because you're a Midwesterner.
I don't care about California. Sorry.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's the San Fernando Valley.
Sorry.
Yes, it's where a lot of the porn industry
it's the
thrives.
Valley.
Okay.
Yeah.
The infamous story that Bay likes to tell is that when he was a kid, he attached firecrackers to his toy train and then filmed the results with his mom's 8mm camera, which resulted in the fire department being called and Michael Bay being grounded. And the
regular Gomez Adams.
Yeah. The man has and always will be an explosion guy. He went to Wesleyan, which means now we have 2 in a row.
Oh my God.
2 weeks in a row, we've covered Wesleyan grads.
I was fucking telling you it's a school for sickos. I wasn't joking.
But Bay hated it. Oh, he hated it there so much. He called it, quote, very cliquey. They all wore dark clothing and they were always, quote, ugh. His favorite class at Wesleyan was a class on movie musicals. And he claims that that's what he wants to do with his action, is to make them in that sort of surreal space that musicals live. And when you watch these movies, I think you kind of get a sense of that. It's a little bit more prominent.
Maybe some of the older ones. I feel like once you get to like Transformers, it's just kind of messy.
Yeah, it gets really sloppy.
It gets too into the like Paul Greengrass territory where you can't tell what the fuck's going on anymore.
Well,
yeah,
and
the camera's real shaky.
Some of that also might have to do with the fact that like at that point too, you're moving away from like actual physical miniatures and stuff like that. It all becomes digitally composited. It's CGI.
Yeah.
Although this movie has a fair amount of CGI and compositing, and it all actually, almost all looks very, very good.
Pretty good, especially given the era.
There's like there was really like 1 or 2 shots when we're seeing the English planes flying that are very, very bad CGI. And I was like, oh, wow. It was like the first point where it popped out. And I was like, I wonder if it's going to be like that on The Attack. But no, The Attack looks fantastic.
Yeah, there's one shot in The Attack where like the ship explodes sort of from the inside. That's CGI that took me out of it. But for pretty much the whole rest of the actual attack on Pearl Harbor, like it looks really impressive. So he gets his start doing the original Got Milk commercial. Oh. And he did
the Aaron Burr commercial?
Yes, that's
God.
That's directed by Michael Bay.
Aaron Burr, sir?
Yeah, he didn't get it. Well, it depends who's asking. Oh, well, sure, sir. So
why don't you both just talk less and smile more?
Yes. Who is this for?
So,
whose children are they?
So he also does 3 music videos for Meatloaf, including including I Do Anything for Love, but I Won't Do That. Objects in the Rearview Mirror May Appear Closer Than They Are, which got an amazing shout out in the HBO series How To with John Wilson. And also, finally, Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through, which starred a very young Angelina Jolie.
How about that?
Oh, yeah.
Here is how his creative partner, Brad Fuller, described Michael Bay on his first big set. The first time I saw Michael, he was doing a video, and there was the hottest blonde girl I've ever seen in my life. And she's got a wind machine on her. She's dancing. She looks hot. She's wearing a short skirt. He's shooting her from a low angle, and he looked at a few of us, and there was this look in his eyes, like he had reached nirvana. It was childlike wonderment.
I think childlike is really the key here because, you know, there are a lot of comparisons to draw between this movie and Top Gun, and we will do that.
Yes.
Tony Scott was a commercial director, just like his brother Ridley. And I feel like Tony Scott never fully abandoned that sense of being a commercial director.
Absolutely.
Michael Bay is also a big commercial director. Yeah, he's doing music videos as well, because that's where there at that time, it's so hard to believe now, there was more money in that than there was even in commercials.
Yeah.
But he was also like doing commercials left and right. But Tony Scott has a much more like libidinal energy to him.
Yes.
There is so much sex in what he does. Whereas like Michael Bay is perpetually like 12 years old.
Yeah.
He's like, ooh, a pretty girl, but he doesn't show too much. And he certainly has no interest in like the male physique until you get to Pain and Gain, which is a different kind of, it's a non-sexual expression of that.
There's a lot of butts in this movie. There's a lot of male butt in this movie, but it's never sexualized.
It's not Tony Scott. It's not Top Gun.
And it's what you do every time you have some kind of military movies. You have the big scene with everyone's tuchus out in view. You actually get a lot of full-blown nudity in the 1928 silent picture Wings.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Pre-code, you could do all that kind of stuff.
Oh, fascinating. So studios were, because of Tony Scott, we get Michael Bay. Like the studios were actively recruiting commercial directors to direct their things because Top Gun was such a hit. So without Top Gun, we don't have Michael Bay. Yeah. We don't have his entire career.
Was it worth it? Yeah.
Let me work it.
Great. So they offer him Saving Private Ryan. That's the first offer.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine Michael Bay's Saving Private Ryan?
I mean, I can, but I don't like it.
Yeah, the only thing that I think saves Saving Private Ryan is that Spielberg is the one behind the helm of it.
And Spielberg has that nice bridge between these loftier sensibilities and being like still a very like purely commercial director.
Absolutely.
Right.
But he doesn't like, he will never sacrifice the art itself for the sake of commercial appeal. He finds a way to unify the two.
There's something that's just very honestly built into what Steven Spielberg is. Yes.
And what that means is that the swings that he takes, he's not going to take the kinds of swings that you're going to see more auteur type directors take.
Yeah.
So he's swinging with a certain target in mind, but he always almost always hits.
Yeah.
So Michael Bay actually is being offered all these scripts, but he can take his time because he's making a shit ton of money from commercials and from doing these music videos
For Meatloaf.
for Meatloaf. So he can really like be picky about what script he picks. And they brought him in to do Bad Boys, right? Which was which originally starred, and this is true, John Lovitz and Dana Carvey.
No, surely
way.
not.
They shot, I guess, there's test footage that exists of Michael Bay's version of this with
Incredible.
John Lovitz and Dana Carvey, and they brought it to the studio heads, and they're like, well, this is deeply unfunny. And so they did a whole casting search. There's some debate about who actually ended up picking Will Smith. Martin Lawrence came on first because he was the bigger star at the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And movie magic was born.
Yeah.
People went nuts for Bad Boys because Michael Bay knows how to make someone look like a movie star.
Yeah, Michael Bay knows how to shoot the shit out of everything. He knows how to do the low angle dolly shot that makes everything seem very large, and you'll get a lot of that in this movie as well.
He knows how to do cool guys walking away from explosions without looking back. And it also is worth noting that it is also Jerry Bruckheimer's commercial savvy as a producer that is so integral to this as well.
So then comes The Rock. Michael Bay is an incredibly combative director, or at least he can be sometimes.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of stories of him just fighting with people on set.
And The Rock works for me because Sean Connery deserves to be yelled at. Do you know what I mean? I'm fine with the combativeness because Connery's such a fucking asshole.
He
Absolutely.
He does. And Nick Cage was such a wild card on that thing. Like, he walked out like on the first day, not in his wardrobe, but in a bright purple Speedo. And Michael Bay was like, okay, sure, he's got to get this out of his system. We're just doing the whole first scene with him in the purple Speedo, and then we'll go from there. So Michael Bay claims that Armageddon is supposed to be a joke making fun of the system.
No, it's not. It is a fully sincere disaster movie.
Yeah,
There's no joke. Come on.
No, it's wild. It's
You
just
don't
like,
get Bruce Willis for an insincere movie.
No, you don't get Steven Tyler to sing like a top 40 hit from Delilah.
right.
For a parody, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other thing is that like Michael Bay has like very few actors that do repeat movies with him. But one of those actors shows up in Armageddon, a young Ben Affleck, who considers Michael Bay to be an auteur. He's like, say what you want about the guy. You watch a Michael Bay movie, you know immediately that it's a Michael Bay
Those
movie.
two guys are cut from the same cloth, though.
Yeah.
You can tell. Like, they're both himbos.
And it's interesting because
absolutely.
Ben Affleck had like a bad reputation as an actor. Like, he was someone who was a star who could get people in the seats, but was not necessarily considered good.
That's what I remember most about Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. And having watched Pearl Harbor, I see why.
He's terrible.
Yeah.
He's fucking awful in this movie.
Can I just say that I didn't mind him as much as I thought I would? I remember watching like at least like the first 40 minutes of this when I was a kid and getting bored and turning it off.
Yeah.
But I remember at the time it being like viscerally like nails on a chalkboard watching him act.
Yeah.
And I thought this time I'm just like, oh, it's just Ben Affleck. You know, like at this point I'm so like
maybe it's exposure
used to it.
treatment,
Yeah.
exposure therapy. Like, you've seen so much of him that you've been desensitized to just how bad of an actor
you've
he
seen
is.
like the good stuff and you're like,
Yeah.
he was fine as Richard Burbage. I don't know.
I think it's like it's not the worst thing I've ever seen in a Michael. It's not the worst performance I've seen in a Michael Bay movie.
No, it's not the worst performance in this movie.
That's true.
No.
We will
We've
get
got
there.
a lot of them.
So Ben Affleck, then, Armageddon was their first collaboration?
Yes.
And so as a result of that, he's now in Michael Bay's Rolodex.
And we get Michael Bay being like, okay, so I have made all these big action movies, right? And I want to try and actually like broaden myself and like try and do like a more intelligent, like, for lack of a better phrase, Oscar bait kind of picture.
Yep.
And it turns out that the studios were also looking for the next Titanic. And they're like, well, who does disaster better than Michael Bay? So they have this Pearl Harbor script. And Brian, I think you can talk about the screenwriter a little bit for this.
Yeah. So this script is by Randall Wallace.
More like Wendell Rawless.
No. So Randall Wallace, if you need to know anything about this guy, you just need to know that he wrote the screenplay for We Were Soldiers, the movie about how the Vietnam War was good, actually. That is not the Green Berets, the one that John Wayne made when the Vietnam War was still happening. This was his other... Now, We Were Soldiers actually happens after Pearl Harbor, but that's the one that I always think of when I think of just this absolute fucking dipshit writer. He also wrote the Secretariat movie, which I guess was very important to him, and it was important to nobody else.
And he wrote the screenplay to Braveheart.
Yes.
That was his big breakout, which was nominated for an Oscar, but did not win.
So it's like on paper, you've got the pieces for the collaboration. You've got Michael Bay, who is a very commercially successful director, still coming off the heels of Armageddon, which did very, very well.
Yes.
You've got, what's his name again?
Randall, the guy whose name you fucked up, Josh, on purpose for a joke, and now you can't remember
It was
it.
a really good joke.
Randall Wallace. And you can remember this because when he wrote Braveheart, he said, I think I'm a descendant of William Wallace.
That's
like
funny.
I feel it in my heart.
So yes, you've got Randall
This
Wallace
man from Tennessee.
We've got a guy who really knows how to direct a movie. We've got a guy who really knows how to write a movie.
Yeah.
What could go wrong? And the answer, dear listener, is a fucking lot.
Yeah, a ton of stuff can go wrong.
A whole lot.
Yeah.
So Dick Cook, who is the former chairman for Disney, said that Pearl Harbor was... What?
Nope. No, that's not a man. That is not a name.
Oh,
of a
I'm
man.
sorry. Yeah, no, I thought I got it factually wrong, but
Dick
no, you're
Cook?
just... Yeah, his name is Dick Cook.
Dick Cook.
Yeah. It's
Dick Cook.
It's Dane's great-grandfather.
Comes from a long line of Dick Cooks.
Yeah.
Out there cooking dicks.
Nom, 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 nom. So Dick Cook, this is going to be a long podcast. The former chairman of Disney said that Pearl Harbor was one of the most difficult shoots in modern history.
Wow.
I can believe it. Yeah.
Affleck describes it as the idea was to kind of make a movie that could be released in the 40s, unironic, slightly naive, with new technology.
That is such a fucking stupid idea from him.
Yes.
That's not what this movie is.
No.
That's not what this movie feels like. What a stupid man.
Well, first of all, they tried it for exactly one morning shoot. Day one, they lasted from 6 a.m. to noon, trying to shoot it in the old-fashioned way. No quick cuts, none of Bay's very hyper-specific.
I don't believe
shots,
this for a second.
Low
This
angles,
is Hollywood myth making.
right? And
I believe it.
then at lunch break,
You would.
when they came back from lunch,
You're
they just
naive.
started shooting exactly the way Michael Bay always shot. And the quote that Michael Bay has from this is, "I don't change my style for anybody. Pussies do that."
Yeah, it's not written like a 1940s movie. Even though it is trying to be simultaneously Tora 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 and From Here to Eternity, it's trying to do that through the lens of it's the 1990s.
And, it's one of those things that I watched the behind the scenes featurette for Pearl Harbor, which is on YouTube. And it's just one of those studio myth making kind of videos where it's just the most important film of the millennium, right? I'm sorry, the Willennium, because this is technically the Willennium.
Yeah, we're kicking off the Willennium.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jar Jar is the key to all this.
He is. He really is. But there was it almost exclusively focuses on the Pearl Harbor attack itself, which is actually probably what this whole movie should be.
Yes.
Because this movie is 30 minutes of Pearl Harbor and then 2.5 hours of just bullshit.
And I guess we might as well, this is as good as opportunity as any to get into talking about what happens in this stupid fucking movie.
We start with a fucking flashback.
Yeah, baby.
We start with two young American boys in the wheat fields of America.
Nice little title card,
Just
Tennessee,
being
1923.
Right, with a sunset, an orange sunset, maybe some other aviation movie, perhaps opened with an orange sky.
Magic Hour.
Bottom pistol? No, that can't be right.
Yeah. We've got a crop duster here, which, by the way, apparently is completely anachronistic.
It's
crop
all over
dusters
the place.
apparently wouldn't come out for another year yet.
That's really funny. Also, wait, did it really say 1920?
1923.
1923.
So they're 10 here. So these guys are in their 30s?
I guess.
Okay, whatever. We're just not putting them in. Okay, so they're we're pretending it's World War I in this crop duster that's it's broken down. It's even though this is a new thing,
Which
it's
actually
totally
makes
broken
it even
down.
more anachronistic.
This is a plane that looks like it's been flown for 20 years and then retired for 5.
They shipped it back from Germany from World War I.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. They're fighting the Germans.
Right.
They're pretending to fly this plane, and and one of the kids' dads is a crop duster, and he lands his active plane, and they jump in that, and then they accidentally fly it and successfully land it.
This whole sequence is so fucking
and then
stupid.
the dad comes over and he's like, "Come here, boy, I'm gonna beat the shit
the
out
other kid's
of you."
you're a German.
Yeah, the kid's like, "I'm still playing World War I. Get off of him, you lousy kraut." And then the dad stops being a 1920s alcoholic father. He stops beating his child
and then
to
becomes
be
a true American hero.
I fought the Germans. I hope you, boy, never see a war ever in your damn life. And then he just staggers off.
So this guy,
Yes.
So this dad is played by Steve Rankin, who you've probably seen in like
great face, man.
Truly, like he's that guy. He's the definition of that guy.
Yeah.
And he gives a lot of gravitas to that line when he's an American hero. But God, this script fails him.
Yeah.
Oh my
deserves
God.
so much better than this fucking
It
garbage.
doesn't really fail him because it's over now. The scene's done.
It's it.
He was on set for a day.
And you might think that this scene is significant, and you'd be pretty wrong.
No, it's just that these boys are friends.
Right.
We set up that Ben Affleck has dyslexia, which is important for a little later, I guess.
That's what that was supposed to set up? I just thought he misspelled something because he was a younger kid. That's really bad.
That's very bad.
That's really bad. But yeah, so we got Rafe and Danny.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
Ben Affleck is Rafe, Macaulay, and Josh Hartnett. Big boy Josh Hartnett.
He was only 23 at the time this movie was shot.
I gotta
Danny
say,
Walker.
Josh Hartnett is very easy on the eyes in this film.
Josh Hartnett actually puts together an okay performance in this.
I actually think it's one of the stronger ones in the film.
I think he's really the draw for this movie if we were talking about actual acting.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes, so we are now in Long Island. The year is 1941, and it's the buzzing the tower scene from Top Gun.
Yes, yeah.
Yep,
The thing is,
absolutely.
Ben Affleck's just too much of a goddamn maverick, as Alec Baldwin, who is also here, says.
Yeah.
The first of our parade. This is like a Kenneth Branagh movie. It's like, here's another big celebrity. It's
like, oh, okay.
And he's gone.
But they're flying. They're a little bit too much of renegades. You know, they fly a little too close. They piss off the commanding officer.
Well, it's an Odyssey bit, is what the note I took. It's like, we're going left, right. Wait, do you mean right? No, left.
Yeah.
And it's like, I was like, oh God, they've got Odyssey in my Pearl Harbor. You got your Pearl Harbor in my Odyssey.
Sam Saburo.
But great news for you, Rafe, Ben Affleck. You're going to Top Gun.
Yeah, he's going to Top Gun. English Top Gun.
So you're doing this thing that did not happen for a lot of reasons, where we were not involved in the war, and we get all this newsreel stuff. It's like, why is America gonna be in this war? And like, he's just like, you're being reassigned to the British Air Force.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean, apparently
there were a lot of Americans.
Did this happen?
There were a lot of Americans who fought for the RAF, but you couldn't do that as part of the Air Force. Because we were neutral. That's
right.
You would be court-martialed.
Correct.
You would get fucked up. It would be illegal. And so a lot of it was like volunteers who, many of them actually joined the Canadian RAF.
Oh, interesting.
And then went over. But there were other people. It's sort of like how now we have people who are like going over to Ukraine. You're not having the U.S. Army saying, you're headed to Azovstal. Get your bags.
Well, it's also that I have to talk you out of actually going to the front. It's like, I'm supposed to say, don't go.
It's like, no, he would be doing this on his own and then wouldn't be welcomed back with entirely open arms at that moment in time.
I really was floored by just how closely this mirrored the beginning of Top Gun. It's the same. It's actually the same.
They're just doing that.
But we should.
Do y'all think that British Top Gun is called Pip Pip Pistol?
No, I don't think it's called that at all.
No.
So we should also have a moment here to talk about our two.
It's called Top of the Gun to you.
Oh, that's the Irish Top Gun.
Northern Irish. It's British.
I see, that is
still,
British,
yeah.
This is a unionist podcast.
Fuck yes,
to be very clear, it is not a unionist podcast.
Let's do this.
No, we are no.
We are fully unionist. We are fully royalist.
No, we are a Republican podcast. That gets confusing
very
quick.
confusing very quickly.
It's very confusing.
We've got, again, Rafe, Ben Affleck, and Danny, Josh Hartnett. What should we know about these guys?
They are played by Ben Affleck and Josh Hartnett.
They are such good friends.
Yes.
That the Navy just keeps stationing them together wherever they go.
Yeah.
So we start with boys as a child.
Yeah.
They fly in the plane to goddamn Maverick.
Right.
Great.
Maverick.
Because
to now we're on a train with a bunch of nurses and they're telling a story in flashback.
It's wild because
and so the nurses are all like, I was out jabbing some asses, and here's some asses that I jabbed. And then we find out Ben Affleck is like, I can't look at the eye chart, but it's not because my eyes are bad. It's because sometimes the letters, they just switch around on me.
We've got nurses. We got hot lady nurses.
Yeah, one of whom is Evelyn, played by Kate Beckinsale.
They're on there.
Jennifer Garner's there too.
And she's mousy. And I thought they were going to do a moment where she takes off her glasses and is not mousy, because that's like that feels very appropriate for Michael Bay and for this era.
Then it's like, oh wow, she's other Kate Beckinsale. That didn't happen.
Yeah. Are you calling her Kate Beckinsdale?
Kate Beckinsale.
It's Beckinsale.
No, and actually now it's Beckinsdale. Okay, we're gonna do this for the rest of the episode.
Just Beckinsdale?
She is Beckinsdale. Yeah, she's beckoning us to the Dale.
That's her name.
No, it's Beckinsale.
Beckinsale.
Beckinsale?
Yeah, Beckinsale.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. Josh.
It absolutely is. Oh no. Oh dear. Yeah, no, it is.
Okay. No, it's Beckinsale now.
To me, she's Beckinsale.
I'm doing gaslight to you.
No, she's Beckinsale to me.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's interesting about the scene with the women on the train is that it is the first shot in the movie for me that's just like, this is 100% like Michael Bay shooting women. Like it is, they're all very glossed up. There's lens flare, like it's all warm oranges. And these women are horny for dick. And that's like their entire personality.
Yeah, they're all just like giggling and talking in like Long Island accents and stuff.
They love meeting boys.
There's some interesting gender going on here. Michael Bay's interest in gender is ultimately that of a 12-year-old. It's not, I wouldn't even call it an adolescent conception of gender.
Yeah.
It's just like you got the boys and you got the girls.
Ooh, look at that girl over there. She's so hot.
Yeah.
She's so hot. Like, I think about the fact that like in Transformers, this was also, I guess, the time when we said this word. Everyone just says pork all the time. You know, pork her. Yeah. And it's like, that is the Michael Bay word for sex.
Yes, it's
porking.
Well, because, okay.
Porking across America.
This is actually, I think, a really good time to talk about Kate Beckinsale. Sorry, Beckinsdale's.
Thank you. Yeah.
Jesus. Time on this movie because, like many women who have worked for Michael Bay, it was not a pleasant experience for her. He does not treat women he does not find attractive well, and even women he does find attractive, he does not treat them very well.
I for one am shocked. Yeah.
This is a quote from Beckinsale. Beckinsdale on Working with Bay. I think he was very alarmed. I think he was very alarmed because I wasn't blonde and my boobs weren't bigger than my head. I didn't make sense to him as an attractive woman. So there was a lot of panic and concern over how on earth are we going to make her attractive.
That's so weird.
You'd think you'd take that really personally, but I sort of managed not to. It's so extreme, I kind of didn't. Which is wild to me because Kate Beckinsale
she's so hot.
Is one of the most attractive women on the face of the planet.
Yeah, I mean, that's why she's cast in this movie.
She's so
some studio note
pretty.
cast her because she is conventionally quite attractive.
Right, but not to Michael Bay.
And
because
it's fun to give people like big, whooshy, curly hair and big red lipstick and nurse uniforms. I mean, come on, it writes itself.
Right, but it's like Michael Bay can't get past his like preconceived notions of the porn that he watched when he was 12 years old. And I'm not saying that the women in those porns aren't attractive. I'm just saying that there is a wide spectrum of beauty in this world, but there's only one for Michael Bay, and it is the bazongas the size of your head.
Yeah, he's very truly a boobs man. We also meet a guy named Red who has a stutter.
Oh yeah, do we even need to talk about this?
No.
Guy?
His name is Red and he has a stutter.
That's him. That's the whole guy. Yeah.
That will have a very weird, dark payoff.
Yeah.
He actually has a bigger arc in this movie than most of the main characters.
Yes.
Am I supposed to be laughing at this guy's stutter?
Yes.
Like it's a comedy role, right? Like it's supposed to be comedy.
On paper, yes.
Yeah, but it's gross and bad.
You get
the main joke is that he gets more pussy than everyone.
Right.
Because he uses the stutter for it.
You get a fair bit of this with all of these different characters here because the next scene that we go into is all of them being at, I guess, a club in New York City.
Yeah.
And the boys all have their plans for how to seduce the women, but then ultimately what ends up happening is like, it doesn't actually matter what their strat is because all the girls are DTF.
Yeah.
Right.
So like,
that's why they came to the city was to get some.
They all put on their Sunday clothes with all the world that's out there.
Put on the Sunday clothes.
It was between that or Real Life Girl. I was like, there's a lot of Broadway musicals that we could go from.
I like it.
Not Dogfight because it's off Broadway.
That's true.
I
mean,
so yeah, they all go on their little quirky dates.
Yep.
And like there's some mishaps. We got some little giggly moments. And then not Gigli moments, giggly moments.
Yes, that would come later. That would come a few years later. Yeah.
And then,
good one, Brian.
And then Rafe goes to England.
Well, yes. Yeah. Although before Rafe goes off to England, a couple little things here.
Yeah.
We spent an inordinate amount of time watching.
This is what the movie's about.
It's so fucking like the length of the scene of fucking Ben Affleck and Kate Beckinsale, going out.
She's my favorite rescue ranger.
They go and board the Queen Mary. Like so many things happen.
That one got a lot of that one got a lot of the old like World War II guys mad because the Queen Mary was painted gray at this time. Military colors.
That's what they were mad about?
No, they were mad about a lot of other things.
They were mad about so much. Yeah. But the thing is about them, they can be mad about each thing.
Right.
Like to the same intensity. Yes. Like it's all the same. Yeah.
Especially if they're on the spectrum. I just wanted to point that out that like if you're the kind of guy who's going to like have extreme detail oriented stuff about like ships,
airplanes, serial numbers.
It's almost as if the Navy attracts a certain kind of guy. I just got to say it.
Yeah.
Almost like the rail industry.
And you know what? I love them in their cute little boats. I think that's wonderful.
That's your level of engagement with this.
Yeah, it's nice little cute boats.
They got their hats. New York. Yeah, it's a hell of a town.
It's a hell of a town. Port. They have a great day on the town.
And I just really want to emphasize how much they love their boats.
It's a wonderful town.
Yeah, so they steal. They're going to try and steal a boat. But the thing about this section that really strikes me is we go into Baz Luhrmann land a little bit with the nightclub sequence.
We do.
Like there is a lot of like low angles, and you get that sort of musical theatricality that Bay was talking about.
And then Welcome to Miami starts playing.
You were bouncing in the car. The heat is on
all night on the Queen Mary until the break of dawn. He wants to do the Baz Luhrmann thing, but he can't.
Because Luhrmann's sensibility is of like a 6-year-old. It's all like Disney magic. And Michael Bay is literally at Disney, and he doesn't have magic. He has cars.
Well, but the commercial aspect of his filmmaking really comes across too in the train station scene. When they first arrive in New York, there's like fog and like steam from the trains like coming out from the train, and it's all shot in this blue light, and it's Ben Affleck running up and picking up his boo and spinning her around old Kate Beckinsale, and it looks like it should end with every kiss begins with K.
Yeah. It feels like a commercial.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
It feels like a commercial.
You keep dropping into different commercials throughout.
Yeah. That's a really good way of putting
it. Vogue or like some perfume or fucking diamonds.
Well, the scene in the club is a liquor ad.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's that visual language.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was like a liquor ad that's like, hey, can you just like copy this Strictly Ballroom movie we all just saw? And he's like, I guess I can try.
But there's also
the thing is, Michael Bay could make an ad for anything. He could make an ad for liquor. He could make an ad for rubber buns.
I hate you. I hate you so much.
I don't get that one.
Oh God, it's an old. So one thing I really hate more than anything in the world is dirty jokes.
Josh is losing his mind.
Because dirty jokes are neither arousing nor funny.
Right.
Like the best case scenario around a dirty joke, the thing that is, I guess, supposed to make it funny is that someone who is not supposed to hear it ends up hearing it, right?
Right.
You want
like
someone to be like, oh no.
Or an old lady.
Yeah. Shocked, yeah.
So like, traveling salesman, farmer's daughter, Johnny Humper Harder, aka Johnny Deeper, depending on, your regional dialect.
Sure.
But one of the ones that really gets me is another joke that also has a couple variations, and it's...
I think you should spend more time setting this up.
I can't wait. The payoff's going to be so good.
I just need people to know that I disapprove.
Right.
And I think Gilbert
Good news,
Gottfried...
I get aroused from dirty jokes,
I think
so here we go.
Gilbert Gottfried actually wrote a book with the title Rubber Buns and Liquor. But it's the joke is...
Oh my God.
I ask you, it's like I'm not Rappaport. I ask you a question and you answer. So it's, what did you eat for breakfast this morning?
Eggs.
You got to do it, AJ. The audience is going to be stuck with more time of me talking about this joke. Great. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
I don't know. What did I have for breakfast this morning?
No, just say the phrase.
Josh, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
Rubber buns and liquor.
Huh, that's odd. What did you have for lunch?
Rubber buns and liquor.
Oh, what did you have for dinner?
Rubber buns and liquor.
What did you do when you saw a hot lady in a dark alleyway this evening?
It's simple. Rubber buns and liquor.
Why would you eat rubber? Why would you? The joke fundamentally doesn't work at the beginning. And then like you can have a conjugation issue arise at the end, like what just happened.
Right.
Also, don't do that. That's not consensual. That's not appropriate.
Well,
that's not good behavior.
Wait, is the
you
joke,
should go to jail.
Is the joke actually always, what did you...
Sexual assault.
Yeah,
that's
the
the
joke.
joke.
That's the punchline,
it's not
sexual
even like,
assault,
what did you and the missus get up to this evening? Rubbed her buns in liquor? Like, you
well,
couldn't
first of all,
even-
Because it can't be rubbed. That's where you run into trouble, right? You have to switch it to future tense. See,
what do you do when you see a hot lady? I rub her buns in liquor.
Yeah.
Right, so it's always assault.
Yes.
Yeah. The other one that you can do is ketchup and liquor, which actually does sound like the sort of meal that some sort of horrible, like alcoholic psychopath who doesn't have anything going on is, oh, I just ate ketchup and liquor. That's at least something.
Right.
But like rubber buns, it's
Horrendous.
a fascination of mine. So whenever the word liquor comes up in my head at this point, I am so diseased. All I can think of at that point are rubber buns.
Right. Now, there are no rubber buns in the club. There are no rubber buns when they go out on their little skiff and go out to the Queen Mary.
Right.
The reason that I'm spending so much time on this specific scene, even though it's relatively inconsequential in the broad scope of the film, is that I think it tells us the most about who Michael Bay is as a director, honestly.
Sure.
Outside of the explosions, which we'll get to later.
Yes.
Because the purpose of this scene, the purpose of all of these scenes, is to ground us emotionally in the stakes of the relationship between Rafe and Evelyn.
Yes.
Ben Affleck and Kate Beckinsale.
And to some smaller, actually much smaller degree, the relationship between Rafe and Danny.
Yes.
Because they're really leaning on the opening scene to be like, they're like brothers.
But what's so wild is that even though we spend, I want to say, at least 15 minutes in this shit.
Yeah. No, it's a long time.
We get nothing out of it.
No.
Well, we get that he chickens out and doesn't actually have sex with Kate Beckinsale because he wants it to be special, or he wants to like remember her, I guess, while he's on the front line and like have something to look forward to, so they never consummate, even though she's really DTF when they like go into the hotel room.
But the problem is, if the scene were designed in such a way where there was clear momentum and narrative through line to get you there, that's where you would land. That's what you'd take away from it.
Right.
But because it's a series of commercials, instead it's like, what am I supposed to be focusing on here?
Yeah.
Right. The fog machine,
and like
for the
all
most part.
of the dialogue in this movie is the most like, here's how to write a screenplay ass dialogue that we've ever encountered.
They're constantly just declaiming. Like it's just big speeches forever.
And there's no specificity. I think that's what's so interesting, because he made them be from Tennessee, a place where Randall Wallace is from.
Yeah.
And yet they feel the most vague on the planet. They don't reference their time growing up in Tennessee. He could have used any of that, but he doesn't.
No, because he's not that kind of a writer.
Yep. Right. The last thing that I wanted to mention about these scenes is Michael Bay's approach to quote unquote humor, which is really just the whomp whomp. It's like a little thing goes wrong and we're supposed to laugh. And you can see this in this movie. You can see it all the time in Transformers.
You can see it too in like when they're getting their shots, they're all acting as though they're having like a 9-foot needle shoved up their asshole.
What I think is so
They're
interesting,
screaming and going, ooh.
Yeah.
But this has also just become such a big part of what blockbuster movies are.
Yeah.
And I think we owe a lot of that to Michael Bay. Every time you get some fucking Marvel movie where some guy has a big reaction to something that shouldn't have that big of a reaction, we have Michael Bay to thank for that.
Immune or
Ben
buns and
Affleck
liquor.
boards his train to London.
Yeah. Well, how else are you going to get to London from New York City?
I just wanted to point that out.
That's incredible. I didn't even think about that shit. What the fuck?
The only reason they did it is so they could lampshade the thing of like her running past the train, which she doesn't end up being able to do. But it's like, why?
They want to do the scene from Reds or whatever.
He really tries hard to get her attention too. He knocks on the glass 3 whole times. She doesn't get up.
Kate Beckinsale just isn't very spatially aware. She's just like me for real.
So yeah, he's in England. We see all the British guys like drinking beer in a field,
That's
which
what
is
they
what
do
they
in
do.
England.
Yeah.
John Voight shows up. He's Roosevelt.
John Voight, as they gave him a chin.
God.
They gave him a
chin.
Roosevelt chin.
They gave him a rosy chin.
We also have Admiral Yamamoto on the side of Japan, played by Japanese-American actor Mako.
Mako's here!
Doing a pretty disappointing performance.
So, and you know what? It's one of the 2 war criminals he will ever play in his life. It's this and Uncle Iroh.
I think that this might be an interesting time to talk just a little bit about the portrayal of the Japanese military, because the way that this film is edited, they sort of like come back in every once in a while, and it's just like, now we've done the next step.
Yeah.
So we don't need to talk about like each scene with them.
No.
I think we just clear this right now.
What this movie wants to do, right? We're leaning on the romance because of Titanic and stuff. It wants to, on one hand, be From Here to Eternity, which is just like a localized romance, character-based thing of people who end up being in the attack on Pearl Harbor. Yep. And it wants to be Tora Tora Tora, the big Japanese and American co-production that involved all of the biggest names in like both Hollywood and Japanese film. And it's like point by point, right? It's this really like exhaustive, though not entirely accurate, recreation of how it all got there. So this movie's trying to do both things and do it in a big, like sleek, fuck you kind of way.
Yeah, and it relies on a lot of like big set pieces, which is weird.
Well, it's like vaguely reminiscent of like Star Wars in terms of just like the sterility of like these giant outdoor spaces. Honestly, it feels
like the newer Star Warses, the Force Awakens, like when we have the scenes on the big Colorado Death Star planet.
But, but the one thing is that they sort of use set dressing to make it look like they basically apply an Orientalist filter to it.
Yeah.
And so to me, it actually kind of reminded me of the joke in Airplane, where they keep passing the news bulletin between the different countries, and then eventually you get on the channel where it's just a guy who communicates by banging sticks on a drum or whatever.
Right.
It's somebody's imagination of what it would look like if you have no exposure to the actual thing and can strictly see things through like an Orientalist Western lens.
And Yamamoto specifically is depicted as sort of, I don't know, mythological even. Like he is this like really grand, larger than life figure. When he's like, he's the naval admiral. He's not even, we're on the U.S. side, we're not spending time with military leadership as much as we are spending it with the president of the United States, right? They're not going over to Hirohito or something like that. It's all the military maneuver here. It's interesting.
Well, it's also it's Mako playing this role, and it's as you said, Brian, it's a very disappointing performance. I first encountered Mako through Pacific Overtures, which I think is the way a lot of people sort of encountered him. And I'd like to take a moment to talk about what it means to be Michael Bay interpreting Japanese culture versus, I think, the way that Pacific Overtures treats that subject, because I think ultimately Michael Bay is a deeply uncurious filmmaker.
Yes.
Yeah. I think like in terms of like what we see of Japan, it's like not the Sea of Japan, but what we see of the Japanese planning and everything like that. So much of it is in the physical production, what was built for the set.
Yeah.
Stuff that Michael Bay can just have like, here's what we have in mind. Sure, fine, great, go
I'll do that.
Do it.
Great. Yeah. Like you look at those scenes like, okay, so just traditional movie villain, like you don't really like. The thing is, like all of the Japanese dialogue in this is so just like perfunctory. Like it's just like, here's what will happen. Like great, that is what will happen. And it's like sort of the end.
It doesn't actually need to be there at all.
There's one brief moment where a naval pilot is writing a letter back home, and for some reason, it's in English.
Yeah, none of the
Japanese scenes
missed that.
It's all in Japanese, and then there's this one guy speaking in accented English, writing a letter back home.
Yeah,
and then he's also getting ready in the same way that kamikaze pilots got ready,
right?
Which is a totally different thing than what was happening. Like that hadn't even started yet, right? That was that was a very desperate late war thing to create like horrific morale issues among like America, because like what do you do with an enemy that's just going to crash an entire plane with the pilot still on it, things like that. And that had its own sort of bizarre way of keeping people under control, because it turns out a lot of people don't just want to go and fucking kill themselves on the battfield today.
Well that's actually really incredible, because I was taught in school that they were kamikaze pilots at Pearl Harbor.
It gets all muddled up, but it's like, no, they're fucking shooting and launching torpedoes and dropping bombs. They're not suicide bombing at all.
That would make sense. And actually, this movie doesn't show any kamikaze.
It does. It portrays
even though it shows them putting the fucking white headband.
I mean, I guess the thing with like taking shots of sake was part of the tradition, but the headbands,
even the sake part, if I understand correctly, was just a kamikaze thing.
Yeah, and look, it was really weird when Mako started singing halfway through. Michael Bay is in a tree because he is afraid of bees.
So that's why you wanted to talk about.
I'm worried about you.
So now we're in England.
Just like, here we are, pip pip cheerio. Here's Leslie Howard.
We get some correspondence, and that guy. There's this incredible moment. Where he just like, this is a character we know nothing about.
Yeah.
But he just walks up to Ben Affleck and tells him that if only everybody were as, hot rodding it as this fucking Ben Affleck guy, like if we could get the U.S. into the war, well, by golly, we would show those Nazis who's boss.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's this other thing, too, that Michael Bay has a huge disdain, I think, for the British people on the whole, because he doesn't even hire a Brit. He's just like me for real. But no, he doesn't even hire a Brit to do the British newsreels. It's just some guy being like, well, it's going to be a terrible day today. The newsreel
narration is so they don't even get a guy who's going to do that. Wow, we're going up.
It's just like, that's what I needed.
It's just like fucking. And Roosevelt has declared that we're going to war.
Yeah, Roosevelt and his giant sack used to store nuts for the winter.
But yeah, this shit with Rafe out on the out in jolly old England leads to a dogfight. Now, this is the first combat scene of the movie where Ben Affleck gets out there in his plane and he shoots at some Nazis.
And this is where the bad CGI shot that I know, the one that really got to me.
Yeah.
This also just is like, oh, now we have to kill this character off,
right?
Sort of. So we're gonna do it the way that Top Gun did. It's a canopy problem.
Well, and so this is my question, right? How does this compare to Top Gun for you guys? Because it's kind of the same.
To be frank, I think the way the relationships between airplanes and velocity and stuff actually feels a little bit better than Top Gun.
I actually agree with that. Yeah.
And we're talking about original Top Gun here, not
original.
Maverick.
Yeah, certainly not Maverick, which is like a totally different game. Like I feel like we get closer to the planes. Whereas Top Gun, you have the issue where the cameras are really fucking far away,
right? And
you get the sense that the cameras are far away, so it feels like documentary footage sometimes.
And the cameras are also moving at the same speed as the planes.
And what makes it work so well in Top Gun, when it does work well, is that the sound is like crazy.
Yes.
This does not have the sound going for it.
And I noticed that. Like once we get to the attack on Pearl Harbor, the quality of the sound design goes up considerably. But in this dogfight scene, there's just not much going on.
Frankly, like these dogfight scenes, you still don't get as much of a sense of velocity. You don't get that like pulse pounding speed that you get in the silent movie Wings, for instance.
Wow.
That movie is fucking crazy. I'm going to make you guys watch it at some point, not for the podcast, just like in general, because it's nuts.
For our own general enjoyment,
very gay.
Great. Well, I mean, the thing about this scene, I was just like, oh, look, the cliffs of Dover. Like, that was actually all I was thinking about. I think actually, weirdly, the scene with the most velocity in this comes during the attack, but it's when the man is dying in the hospital, when the camera's just like shaking like a man dying.
They actually have like the lens like off of its mount and shifted.
Yeah, it's really interesting and wild. There are actually, and look, to Bay's credit, the guy can shoot things pretty well, and there are some very interesting shots in this movie, but my argument is at what cost?
Yes.
And it's the cost of having to watch Pearl Harbor,
right?
I think.
And
3 hours of our lives, 9 collective hours of our lives.
That's a tough thing to think about.
Yeah, no, it's real hard. Think about the poor editor of this movie that had to spend so much longer.
Oh, I mean, the editing of this movie is absolutely incredible. It's just like the technical achievement of this is nearly impossible.
And I mean, another thing that made me very sad was when Ben Affleck died. Not really. I didn't care.
No, because he doesn't, they don't even give you the sense that he died on
he's
screen.
Very clearly not dead.
In the middle of the battle, and then they're like, Ben Affleck has died.
It was also like, I couldn't even tell that it was him at first.
It's like, which plane is it?
Because there's other guys.
Yeah.
They do
children are
they also do the Top Gun thing of like showing different guys in different cockpits. But, eventually Ben Affleck's plane crashes into the ocean. Oh no, he's dead. And we find out because then Josh Hartnett shows up over at Kate Beckinsale's house and is like, oh, he's dead.
Because this whole time that this has been happening, we have actually been cutting to Pearl Harbor proper and getting to know the characters.
There was a little like 3 months later thing where Red, the guy whose thing is that he has a stutter, he proposes to his girlfriend, who is a pretty blonde lady
named Betty.
Too much happens. Like,
that whole scene could be cut. The whole bit of him proposing.
But they need him to propose because they're trying to make that their big Lord of the Rings boy soprano singing tragedy when they haul her body. A surprise, she gets killed.
Yeah. But yes, everybody else has now taken the train to Honolulu.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
They just move. Oh, you're all friends? Yeah, you all get to go to Oahu together.
That's how that works.
On the train.
And as they arrive into Pearl Harbor, all the women are being hooted and hollered at by some of the men that are on, I think, the Arizona, which will be blown up by the end of this movie, spoiler alert. But they're all wearing the almost exact same costumes as the women in Titanic. Like, they have the big hat. They have Kate Winslet's giant fucking hat. And it's like, okay, and there are a couple of spots in this movie because they desperately wanted a Titanic. That, like,
they
God,
needed it. They needed it.
They were so hungry for that Titanic. And they just straight up steal shots from that movie and throughout Pearl Harbor.
We'll talk about the one. You know, another thing that happens is that we meet Cuba Gooding Jr. Again, this is a character who is based on a real guy. It's also worth noting that he is the first black person to show up on screen for 45 minutes into this film.
Dory Miller, because I was like, he mentioned not having shot a gun, and I was like, gee, I wonder where his arc is going. And then I was like, wait a second, I've heard this story. I actually know Dory Miller, who then manned the anti-aircraft gun during the attack, but he was just a cook. And you know, the segregation in America's army being what it is, like that was the role that he was allowed to have in the Navy.
Right.
And he is an important historical figure. And it's just like, here's this guy. Bye.
Yeah, we don't know like who he actually is when we meet him for the first time. He's boxing some fucking Mick.
He is boxing one of the largest men in the world who is wearing a pair of the tiniest boxing gloves I've ever seen in my the world's tiniest boxing gloves. Oh, you know what I learned from my fight with Cuba Gooding Jr.? It weren't us that were teaching radio.
There it is.
Radio was the one teaching us.
There it is.
Another funny thing that like the IMDb fact checkers pointed out is that they have the U.S. issued currency in Hawaii that had a special Hawaii printing on it after we entered the war. That way, if Hawaii got taken over, they would just render it completely valueless.
And this was also something...
And yet you see them with that money
that's
here
a
before
fun
the
little
war
prop
starts.
Touch. I like that. That was also something that the United States would do once areas were basically liberated from the Axis. They would put currency into circulation. I actually have some of those bills.
Oh, interesting.
That are from they're like American bills from liberated parts of Germany.
And that's, you know, in addition to, of course, just like regular wartime script that you'd have on bases. That's not worth anything outside of that context.
Right, but why aren't we following Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character
That's
in this
a great
movie?
fucking question.
Because like that's a story, right?
Yeah, no, it's
the story
really
of
good.
a guy in the segregated Navy.
Has there been an actual movie made from beginning to end about that guy's life?
I don't believe so. No.
I think this movie poisoned the chance of that ever happening.
That could be true.
Because it was so eviscerated by the critics. I don't think anyone would really want to go back. I hope so, because it's such a good story.
Yeah, I think
it's
just like, you need to wait another 20 years to get another Pearl Harbor movie. I don't know, but it's been.
Yeah, it's been.
Yeah.
The other thing that I just wanted
20
to
years
know
is a Pearl Harbor movie.
is that this is also an interesting thing about it being the year 2001.
Yeah.
Hollywood is woke now. Of course, we know this. They're pushing the woke socialist agenda onto our children.
Yes,
They weren't woke here.
They weren't woke at this time.
They were based. They were
whose children are they?
Mine.
Great.
But
who are these children coming down?
The point I'm trying to make here, though, is that at this point, there wasn't even really the studios at this point did not yet really see any value in doing anything beyond the most tokenistic of representation.
Yes, and this is more threadbare than most.
Right.
Yeah.
Which it shouldn't be, because again, we've said this a number of times, he was a real fucking guy.
Yeah. And like, he gets a really badass arc. He gets on a fucking anti-aircraft gun that he's never operated before.
Cuba Gooding Jr. gets to go, ah!
Yeah.
Like one of the biggest failures of this movie is that our main characters have almost nothing to do with the attack on Pearl Harbor itself.
Yes. No.
They have to invent like an actual arc for them to go on.
Just like the Adventures in Odyssey episode.
Yeah, right. It's just like, why are people so averse to doing a movie that's just set on one of the battle cruisers that follows a crew of those people, their lives, they're like all of them
Crazy
being
shit.
in like purgatory, right? And then they like all get attacked and they have to like rise to the occasion and take the L. Like, I mean, come on, that's a movie.
So Danny, Josh Hartnett, he fucks Evelyn, Kate Beckinsale in a parachute. They fuck in a parachute.
They fuck in a room full of parachutes.
That is such a weird scene.
It's something that, like, you know, it's every kid's dream when they go to gym class and it's parachute days. They want to fuck Kate Beckinsale.
Yeah, this is the point where I wrote there are 2 hours and 13 minutes left in this movie.
You really start to feel it. We get a stock shot of what is very clearly the U.S. House of Representatives. Like, you can see the dome of the Capitol.
Yeah.
And they've used After Effects to write Navy Department above the columns.
But it's like an SNL kind of like
a
hatchet job on it. Like it looks terrible.
Because we also get to Navy SIGINT, and guess what? Dan Aykroyd is in this movie.
Dan's here. Danny boy.
Yeah, so we get a lot of just sort of the back and forth in a very loose, I mean, this is not really historically accurate, but it's like the basic idea of like, something's happening, we don't know, blah, 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 what's going on. They don't want to blame anyone.
That's
and
what's
I think
interesting,
a more
too.
interesting movie would place blame on somebody.
But I think that part of that has to do with the fact that it was authorized by the Navy. And if you're working with the Navy, because they gave the team access to pretty much all of Pearl Harbor to shoot.
But
but the story 60 years later.
The story of Pearl Harbor is the story of failure.
A massive fuck up.
And that's the big problem that the movie has to deal with too.
Yeah,
and that's why it's another hour long, is because they have to resolve that somehow.
One other thing that happens during sort of this soup is there is a Japanese American dentist who gets on the phone with I guess he doesn't know who he's talking to, and he describes the ships that he sees out of his office window.
Right.
This is such
and then we see a guy who like comes over with like spy cams, which are not like spy cams. No, come on. No, the like massive lenses hanging out of a suitcase. Oh yeah. This is no, people were making fucking like Ansco made a makeup box with a secret box camera inside of it in like 1920, and you wouldn't fucking know from looking at it.
Right.
Like, spy cameras were better than this.
So here's the thing about the dentist. I want to bring it back to the dentist because I think this is important.
It is very important.
This is the only time we see a Japanese American in the entire fucking movie.
Yeah.
And
he's collaborating.
But it's the question of like, is he doing so wittingly or unwittingly? It's very unclear.
But either way, it's the result is the same, which is that he gives key intel. When in fact, I remember this from the Odyssey episode that when we covered it, it was a German family, right?
There was a Japanese spy, but he was in the embassy. He just did the same thing that all spies do, and they were just in the embassy. The spy family, the Spy X family, was a kraut. And it's debatable whether he was even valuable or not, but he was the one who got like his 6-year-old child to like take pictures on Waikiki Beach or fucking whatever.
And not only was he a kraut, he was a kraut who needed to adopt a child into his life and then find a believable woman to portray his wife. Because, you know, as an espionage agent, the three of them needed to create sort of an informal spy family of sorts that they could then use to advance the missives of the agency that he worked for.
I already said Spy X family.
I needed to make the joke again. Suck my dick. But here's the piece also about that, right? Yeah. In order to understand the history of the United States, particularly with World War II, it is the history of obviously Japanese internment, of Japanese people being treated as sleeper agents, basically.
Right.
This obviously led to the internment camps. And these are the questions that a good movie about this also needs to ask. And Michael Bay is completely uninterested in asking those questions.
The closest it ever comes to it is like a very bizarre moment. There is a doctor that you see on the base who is Asian American, and there is one soldier who is injured, and he's like, "Get away from me," and he calls him a slur, and it's like
that slur's all over this movie, by the way.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like a World War II movie. It's what's gonna happen, I guess. But like,
it's.
Also, we have Colm Feore doing the weirdest work I've ever seen him do in my life, and not as a positive thing. His accent changes every scene. Mm-hmm. At one point, he does the whole scene as Morgan Freeman in Outbreak.
No. That's a very good point. But to me, when I look at him, I see the studio note of get somebody who looks like Victor Garber. Get us a captain of the Titanic. And it's kind of uncanny.
That makes sense.
Once you view it throughout light. And it's also, I mean,
Canadian Victor Garber.
It is also weird when he wakes up on the day of Pearl Harbor and they're like, "What's that noise?" He goes, "Youthquake."
Which would be a less ridiculous line than the one we get where Josh Hartnett's like, "Looks like World War II just started."
Which is wild.
And also, by the way, not true. Just want to point that out. Just very important. No, World War II started when Hitler crossed into Poland. What are you doing?
There's already a war.
Lord.
Not in the States.
Don't mention the wall.
But yeah, like Michael Bay, the questions that he is interested in asking are questions like, can the world's most boring love triangle ever be satisfied?
Yeah.
By the way, Rafe's alive.
Yeah. Surprise.
So Josh Hartnett has been fucking Kate Beckinsale, and Ben Affleck just shows up,
and she's pregnant.
Yeah, which is the twist that they hold off until the very end of the movie.
But they show her and she's in the bathroom for an hour. She comes out looking nauseous. And you're like, she's obviously pregnant.
Yeah.
And at this point, we're an hour and 15 minutes into the movie. Pearl Harbor still hasn't been bombed yet.
I do like the moment where Josh Hartnett gets a letter from Ben Affleck and he opens it and it's just a picture of Ben Affleck in a hospital robe with the caption, "I lived, bitch," underneath it.
We get a scene in a bar. It's the bar scene from Top Gun.
Yeah,
this is also a weird scene because like one of the strange things about Michael Bay is that in a lot of scenes you don't get a good sense of space and you have no idea how big this bar is.
Yeah.
For all you know, it's just this single outside, literally just the bar and a small deck and nothing else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then this big bar fight thing ends up kind of swirling around it and ending up inside the business establishment. But again, you just feel like everyone is in like a 6 foot by 6 foot box together. Box.
Yeah. And you know, really what we learn here is that now there's bad blood between Rafe and fucking what's his name? Josh Hartnett.
Because this is going to be the thing that sustains the rest of the movie.
But it's also like he figures it out immediately. Like it's just like based on a look.
Yeah.
Like he looks at Josh Hartnett and he immediately knows that they've been fucking.
Yeah.
And
it's just like, hey, I'm back. You fucked her.
Yeah, but it's also like, I mean, that's the thing is that this movie is so long and yet it feels so rushed. Like all the moments that they actually needed to take to slow down, they don't have time for because we have to keep cutting back to the Japanese and their planning of the attack.
It's sort of the thing that I was talking about in the other episode about like whatever the opposite of economy of storytelling is.
Yeah.
It's this, right? Where
it's the poverty of storytelling.
Poverty of storytelling. You get these long, drawn out scenes where nothing fucking happens.
And there's no sex to it. So like, what are we supposed to do? Like in Titanic, she takes her top off.
You get to see Kate Winslet's tits. Exactly. Like,
which is weird because she was 19 at the time. When I was a kid watching that, I was like, hell yeah. But now I'm like, that's a 19-year-old. I guess, you know, I talked to my fiance about this yesterday and they were like, you know, actually chronologically, those boobs are still older than you. So I think it's okay.
True. But like you also get the car, the steamed window, the hand, the smearing.
There's some raw sexuality. Although I was surprised that in like the parachute scene, there is like one steamy moment where like Beckinsale tilts her head back. But Michael Bay doesn't know how to make her attractive because he doesn't think she's attractive.
You're right. It's there is an interesting. I will say there's like one moment in that love scene that is sort of interesting where Kate Beckinsale grabs Josh Hartnett by the dog tags because he's wearing Rafe's dog tags. That to me was interesting.
Yeah.
But again, like there's not enough.
But why does he have his dog tags if he's not dead?
Not only is there no, sex in the movie, there's no sex in the script.
Yeah.
You know, our boy Wallace has done nothing for us.
Yeah, no,
here.
they just
our boy William Wallace's
they float into the parachutes, they float down to the ground, they float like it's a mess. I don't know.
Imagine Tony Scott with this moment.
Oh, can you
with the parachutes?
Oh my god.
Oh god.
It'd be so good.
It'd be so good. Oh, it'd be so fucking good.
Playing with the boys.
I mean, it might not be good, but it would be good.
But it would be like you'd get skin.
Yeah.
And I realized like she's actually wearing a more period accurate bra than you usually see when you're watching these movies because they seem kind of funny now because they're big and conical and stuff. And I'm realizing it's just because Michael Bay thought her tits weren't big enough.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's like, fuck it, let's just do period accurate underwear.
Yeah, no, it's fucking wild and gross. So we hit the day, right? We hit December 7th, 1941.
I mean, I'm wondering if maybe this is a decent time to take a break.
I think this is where we're gonna go. So like they got into a bar fight, everyone's sort of fucked up, they're all hanging out, so it's Sunday morning. It's good morning, Sunday morning.
Everyone's got a hangover.
Our boys are like, they're in a Jeep, they're far away, much like the Adventures in Odyssey episode, where they are knocked out in a Jeep.
Michael Bay was a big Odyssey
I was going to say. Can you imagine? Can you fucking imagine Michael Bay
Only one
listening?
man can save the world, and his name is John Avery Whittaker.
I swear to God, if Michael Bay had listened to the fucking, East Wind's Raining episode of Adventures in Odyssey as part of his research for this movie, I don't even know what I would do with myself.
He doesn't do research.
He sure doesn't. There's the Wikipedia article for Pearl Harbor is mostly inaccuracies. It is half of it is half of the plot and the production. The other half is just strict inaccuracy.
Misconceptions.
But the attack on Pearl Harbor itself has as much to do with the plot of this movie as the 9/11 twist at the end of the Robert Pattinson movie Remember Me.
Yeah.
Like it's almost incidental that this battle happens.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that battle after this quick message from Michael Bay.
Hey, what's up, pussies? It's me, Michael Bay, director of Transformers. Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. Transformers Dark of the Moon. Transformers Age of Extinction. And Transformers The Last Night. The movie where Optimus Prime teams up with Merlin, who's played by Stanley Tucci? That's real? The Tooch is loose?
The Tooch is loose.
Babies, do you like spaghetti? Do you like a warm poos? Do you like spaghetti that has the taste and consistency of a warm poos? Then you are going to love SpaghettiOs, the only canned pasta alternative that will make you say, "Can pasta sauce expire?" Our lawyers assure us the answer is no.
Our lawyers are also international assassins.
It's got everything a food should have. Nudes, sauce, and can.
Am I an internationally renowned film festival? Because my favorite ingredient is can.
So pour yourself a lukewarm can of SpaghettiOs today and say, ooh, to a bowl full of small rounds that kind of look like nips if you squint. Guys, can we just take a minute here? Aren't boobies the best? Just bouncing all over the place, not a care in the world. It's all I can see now when I dream at night. Two mommy milkers appear to me, this entire human torso, which always looks surprised with its dinner plate nippies and its SpaghettiO-shaped belly button. And it speaks to me by violently bouncing up and down.
Michael Bay.
It shakes.
It is me, a human torso with breasts. Make movies with many explosions, Michael. This will make humans show you their breasts. There are so many fun things you can do with breasts. Like honka honka, awooga, and blow things up, Michael Bay. We, a pair of sentient human tatas, demand it.
So buy SpaghettiOs today so I can fund my next project, Transformers 6, Megatron's Mega Titties, which will totally gross $950 million. SpaghettiOs, now that's a dicey meatball.
So it's December 7th, 1941.
Is that your Roosevelt?
A day which will live in infamy.
Oh boy, we find out, by the way, that it's December.
Better than Voight's. Are you kidding?
You're not
me?
wrong.
God.
We find out that it's December 7 because somebody takes
There's
a calendar and rips off the 6, and it's a 7. This is somebody on a Japanese.
Someone
It's
in
Moscow, I
Japan,
think, yeah.
which they're on the other side of the international date line.
Well, I think they're on the boat. I think that's what that is. They're on the boat.
Yeah, but it was
It's
still
Mako.
like they would be going off of Japanese time. Like they're
Yes.
not going to be like,
Oh,
we're in
yeah.
this time zone
Oh my
now.
God,
It's
that's
December 7th.
right.
No, it's still December 8th. Like,
And also definitely would be using Arabic numerals. Like, come on now. That's not.
well, that's alongside the guy writing the note in
Right,
English for
right,
some
right.
reason.
to his family. So the Japanese planes make their way to Pearl Harbor.
Yep.
They fly over a bucolic scene in America.
Yeah, we see all the Santa Clauses being set up. It's Tim Allen and Tim Allen and Tim Allen.
We see a bunch of kids playing all-American baseball.
Yeah. So this
Yeah.
That poor woman's laundry gets ruffled.
There's little girls running around in fairy wings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was so interesting to me because, and this is something that a number of people talked about when the film was released, was like, why are there no Hawaiians on Hawaii in this movie?
Yeah, I know.
Why is everybody
No.
fucking white?
Yep.
And it's not just that they're white; they are white. Like,
Yeah.
it's,
What is this, a Cameron Crowe movie?
Yes, these beautiful Aryan boys and these beautiful Aryan girls, all just really celebrating how wonderful it is to be white Americans.
Yeah.
And contrasted, of course, with the menace that is presented by these horrible, evil, monstrous Japanese airplanes. And it's worth stating, we kind of mentioned this earlier, but like the way that the Japanese fleet and all of the Japanese soldiers are portrayed in this movie, they're basically just Decepticons. Like they just exist for the purpose of being evil.
Yeah, at this point, like you realize that all of these scenes with Japan were not to be like a procedural development of how this attack takes place.
Yeah.
It was just to be like, see? We show the Japanese side too.
Right. Yeah.
Very much like we were soldiers did with Vietnam.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I will say this is, I think, the most telling thing. If you were to like cut together just the Japanese sections of Pearl Harbor, one transition from one scene will be Mako saying, "We must achieve surprise." And then the next scene immediately following would be, "We have achieved surprise." Like, it's so useless.
But that's like, you're not exaggerating. Those are the literal lines.
Yeah, I know.
What do you say when you eat breakfast? We have achieved surprise.
Dear God. So this is sort of like, this is like the centerpiece of the movie.
Yep.
And I think credit where credit's due, explosions look good.
Of course they do.
Yeah.
It's Michael Bay.
Yeah.
How could they not?
It's a thing he
We've got
does
explosions.
extraordinarily well.
We've got ships that tilt and turn.
Yeah.
Much like another movie. Also, maybe a Broadway musical half the time when the machinery was working correctly.
Standing in your pajamas in Pearl Harbor's Bay.
So I just wanted to
Said
point
to
up
be
as
bizarre in the
well
extreme.
that the first impact occurs at, and I took down the exact
First
timestamp,
impact.
1 hour, 28 minutes, and 27 seconds into the film.
Yep.
Yeah.
Into
It's
this
like
3-hour movie, we are
at-
halfway in.
It's like in funny games when the guys are like, "Oh, we can't kill you now. We haven't hit feature length yet," and that happens like right when you get the 90-minute point.
God, I gotta watch funny games at some point.
Yeah, you're gonna have a great time.
So wildly, we spend a very inordinate amount of time not at the attack, but getting to the attack with our two protagonists.
Yeah.
Yes.
While Cuba Gooding Jr. is on the ship, like he has this moment with like a dying officer who's just been like blown to pieces.
Yeah, I think it's
where
the
he's just
captain
like,
of the ship. I think this is another
Yeah.
real person, but this is not how he died either.
Yeah, but he was just like, you have to pass it off to my commanding officer. Like he has the he has control of the ship now, and he's just like, don't worry, Captain, you trained us well. And it's this very like just like
Wait,
sappy,
It's like,
over
bro, you're just handling the laundry.
I was
Like,
going to say, you're
like,
not, you're,
You're a cook.
What?
Yeah,
And-
no, it's so
and
hokey.
At first,
and-
there's some like an idea of attention to detail,
Yeah,
where it's like
yeah.
you see them installing the different fins on the torpedoes.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't know that the airplanes drop torpedoes. I didn't
Yeah.
know that. They drop them into the water
I didn't
and
know
then
that
hit
either.
the ships. You see the bombs that land and don't immediately explode because of course the Arizona, that's what happened. A bomb
Right.
got into the ship and then the fuse finished and it
all
exploded.
that ordnance that
Yeah.
was down there in the forward compartment blew up, and
Yeah.
the Arizona became, as we all know, a grave for
Yeah.
what,
That
like
just-
1,000
that just-
plus.
That just actually happened
Sailors
at
or
the
something?
at the end of that attack.
Right.
It's one of those things where like it starts with the Arizona getting bombed, and then we see the Oklahoma capsize, and that kind of takes up the later half of that.
Yeah.
Flip it around.
Here's
It's the other way.
Here's what I'll say
interesting.
though: all of the reviews that talk about this movie in even close to a positive light
Right.
talk about this sequence.
Yeah.
And they're all talking about like how impressive it is, how remarkable all components of it are.
Yeah.
My question for you guys is it good actually?
I mean, it's incredibly hard to pull off, and it's coherent all the way through, which is something Michael Bay can't even keep up with later on in his career.
It's
like
long.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely trying to do what James Cameron did with both Titanic and then later with like Avatar, where
Right.
Avatar has like a fucking 90-minute action set piece for its ending.
Right.
Of course, this is the middle of the movie, But
right. But I think James. Well, okay, so what separates Titanic from this movie? I mean, there's so many fucking reasons. But like the big one for me is that Cameron did the research. Like he studied every single minute that the Titanic was sinking, and he mapped it out in real time.
He got as close to as hands-on as like any human being could get.
He literally got into a submersible and went down there. Like,
I mean, honestly, it seems like kind of an excuse. Like the Titanic was just kind of like an
absolutely.
excuse to go
that's
underwater.
The thing that he actually likes to do.
And then he can also make more bank on the footage later on. But even so,
meanwhile, Disney producing this, they make bank by using theme park synergy, and they had an attraction at MGM Studios, later Hollywood Studios.
They did not.
Until like recently. I don't think they took it out until maybe even after COVID hit. I'm not sure. But it was like how Hollywood special effects are done, using the example of this scene from Pearl Harbor.
Oh my God.
And so it's like, remember Pearl Harbor? Not the real thing, the movie?
We're gonna make ya. But there is like sort of a thing like, I think the advantage of Titanic is that you're stuck in a box. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a claustrophobia to it. And Cameron is a master at giving you the layout of the ship so that when it starts to sink, you know where you are.
Yeah.
And you're actually invested in somebody in every single class of the thing.
That's huge.
Yes.
Characters.
Yes.
There are so many moments in this scene where you will see a guy, swimming, holding on to the hull of a ship.
Saying, I can't swim as it's sinking into the water.
But it's also like, well, whose children are they? Like, I don't know any of these guys.
I feel nothing watching this.
Who are these sailors coming down?
Yeah, I don't know.
And
we don't know.
We could have something like Titanic where like it could talk about race a lot more. It could use any kind of angle on this, but instead we've got the fucking like Guinevere Lancelot thing going on.
Well, and it's also, but like Cameron deals a lot in archetypes, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying that Jack and Rose are
it's not
particularly
exactly rich
deep characterization, but he knows how to utilize those archetypes effectively so that you do care when Jack sinks into the bottom of the ocean. Yeah. A lot of that has to do with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet's chemistry and their abilities as actors.
That's important. That's another thing that Bay fucks up. He doesn't get there. He doesn't get people with chemistry.
But again, I mean, not to sound like a fucking broken record here, but it comes down to the fact that he's not interested in asking the questions in the first place.
No.
So of course you're not going to get to the answer if you don't want to seek it out to begin with, right?
Yeah, he want to make things go boom, and he made things go boom.
He does.
And Wallace's script is just like the culmination of the relationship. All of that is going to happen with a separate thing that's going to happen for the last third of the movie. That's not the attack on Pearl Harbor.
And this also then, to the point of like the script and the characters, the script doesn't actually know where to put Josh Hartnett and Ben Affleck at this point.
Right.
So what ends up happening over the course of this entire set piece, which again is like a half hour at least, is they just keep running around between different places. So like for a little bit, they are in a car and they need to drive in the car back to Pearl Harbor, much like the fucking Adventures in Odyssey episode.
With a guy with a handheld movie camera. And Brian, I have to ask, this reporter with this camera filming this footage. Yeah. I mean, is there any basis of that in actuality?
I guess. I don't think that I don't know if there was a reporter who died. But
no, I just meant the camera. Like,
the
could
camera,
that have existed?
Well, the camera's right. It just looks like they're filming 8mm film on what is a 16mm camera. I could be wrong. I don't know that much about movie cameras, but like it's a little funny. The film stock that comes out of it too is also like really inky black, like the blacks are like really deep, which it would be kind of weird. Like that's not what you see when you see black and white footage from that time.
Right.
Especially because we see other black and white footage from the time in the movie already.
Yeah, it kind of looks more like the footage that's shot on the camera in Doctor Strangelove.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Like the combat scenes in Doctor Strangelove?
It does look more like it's from like the 60s. Yeah. And it is real film. They did shoot on real 8mm and 16mm and 35mm film. They filmed, because again, you're fitting stuff into little airplanes. You have to do kind of funny stuff like we talked about with Top Gun. So there are some cameras that were going vertically, some cameras that were going horizontally, just crazy stuff.
Right.
But what we have here for our through line for the protagonists of this movie, Rafe and Danny, their whole thing is they have to get to the harbor and then become heroes by getting on planes and taking off. That doesn't take a whole lot of time. Right. So we just keep cutting away from them for a really long
stretch
stretch of
it
time.
out. And the problem is every time you cut away, you are cutting away to something that is generally visually pretty striking.
Yeah,
right.
But
the boat's getting hit.
The boats are blowing up.
The actual attack.
But you don't have any stake in it because you don't know any of the people. And rather than taking sort of the really high view and being like, look at these boats exploding, which, would be something. We're spending so much time again on these individual people who we don't know, who are dying mostly bloodless deaths, by the way, because this is a PG-13 movie.
The most like you get in any emotional investment in any of this, I think, is the hospital. And I think even that gets kind of fucked up.
Yeah. I mean, there's some cool camera shit happening in the hospital, and I think it is the most harrowing portion of this. I'm always like, the hospital scenes in any movie, like big historical like tragedy like this, are the ones that always fucking get me.
It's always even like something like the TV show MASH. It's like, oh, all of a sudden you're just flooded with wounded. Like this is a real look at the logistics of what's going on. The attack is still ongoing, and they're having to deal with wounded as they come in.
Which is why they set it in a hospital. A hospital is always an effective sort of dramatic point of focus because it's where so many stories come together, and you always have something that you can do.
Yes.
Yeah. And it is the most
excellent way of putting it.
Like harrowing and like panic, and like you get the panic of the surprise attack of Pearl Harbor the most in the hospital because they don't have shit. Right. Like they don't have the provisions ready for all these people.
We're not at war.
They have to get Danny and Rafe have to start doing blood transfusions into Coca-Cola bottles.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
Which also interesting.
Yes. And Bay doesn't believe that it's interesting because then he has the hospital get bombed.
Right.
Which didn't happen. This was a military attack. There was collateral damage. There was some damage done to the hospital. There was some strafing done on civilian targets. There were no bombs dropped on hospitals
because
or civilian
that wasn't
targets.
the point. The point was to fuck up the infrastructure and specifically to fuck up the boats and the planes.
Right. I mean, bombing civilians, what are they, us?
Yep.
I mean, Japan did.
They did do that. They just did it to the Chinese.
Which we will get to later.
Yeah. Oh boy. So this attack goes on for a really long time. The men are being macho and trying to like shoot just like pistols at the planes.
Yeah. Again, that's a real thing.
I know that really did happen.
You have fucking nothing, but you do have the gun. Might as well.
But here's the thing: is that a better version of this movie would portray it as something that is going to be like, it's probably fruitless, but let's try.
This is a disaster. This is pure carnage. That's what this should be.
That's not what's happening here. Instead, once Josh Hartnett and Ben Affleck sort of get to the hangar, I guess, they go Rambo, dude. Like it's like
full Rambo. It's full action movie at this point.
It's the first Rambo too, because they get a second one when they're in China.
This is Rambo. This is Rambo 1.
Michael Shannon shows up.
Yeah, Michael Shannon. Well, Michael Shannon has been in this movie for the whole time, and he's I think probably one of the best performances in this thing. He is. Michael Shannon plays a character named Lieutenant Goose Wood.
It's Goose?
It's Goose.
I thought they were saying Goose the whole time.
Gooz, like multiple goose conforming into one body. Goose Wood.
Talk to me, Goose.
Talk to me, Goose. If there's any comedy in this movie, he's the one that sells it, I think, the best.
Yeah, and it all happens despite the material because he actually seems like he hates the movie.
Well,
he definitely hates the movie.
But Michael Shannon is also one of the, and this is, I think, a fact that is widely known among acting circles, but maybe not so much outside of it. He's one of the best improvisers there's ever been.
Really?
He is a hugely talented improviser because there's nothing about him that is fake. Like he is so 100% himself that anything he responds to is going to be the most naturalistic thing. Like he's just tremendous.
Which is also the terrifying thing about him. Like the time that I went to the Soho Rep Uncle Vanya and then went outside afterward and like a block down the street, I saw him like screaming at his castmates.
Oh, fuck me.
I think he wasn't happy with how that performance went. He has a lot of the anger that I know in myself. And
sure, yeah.
He's got that white boy anger. Yeah.
And
then
up
with it, Loki.
I also think it's very.
This is perfect for Bug too.
This is a very stupid thing. But there is another person that is like Michael Shannon's like friend at the hangar, and if you forget his name, don't worry about it. It's Earl, and you'll know because it's on his hat. He has written the name Earl on his. He has a name tag, just in case you've forgotten at this point who the fuck this character is. His name is Earl.
We have so many situations in this movie though, because like there's so many characters who you're expected to care about and remember, right?
And they're all off to the side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except for, again, Danny, Rafe, and Kate Beckinsale, none of whom I care about.
Not even enough to learn her real name.
Yeah, what is Evelyn?
It's Beckinsale.
Evelyn, that's her name.
Yeah, like,
no, it's Beckinsale.
She's in the hospital, and the hospital like has its thing going on. That's something, but like there were 5 planes that took off. That was a thing that happened. Again, we got a couple planes shot down. We got to focus on that, but there is no victory in this day. There is no victory in this moment. This is just death and misery.
And there was actually there was an airman who was able to shoot down, I want to say like 6 Japanese planes, which, I mean, very impressive.
Maybe it prevented the third wave. There was this call that they were going to have another wave that was going to attack more of the land targets, and they didn't go through with it.
Or it could just be that they got what they needed out of it.
It's been an hour and 15 minutes. Maybe we need to wrap it up.
Someone should tell it to Michael Bay.
Yeah.
No kidding.
I mean, I was worried the entire attack, they were going to do a full 1 hour and 15 minutes of this.
Right.
It felt like it. But
I mean, honestly, if you were to do it in real time and you could do the pacing the way that Cameron did in Titanic, that might actually, I think that probably should have just been the movie.
Again, that's attention to detail. That's what it comes from. Cameron was meticulously recreating shit to the point where, like, when he re-released it, he changed where the stars were because Neil deGrasse Tyson made some fucking tweet about it.
That guy is so annoying.
He sucks.
No, he's awful. I really do remember, like, there was like some sort of special feature on Titanic where like Cameron was going through the ship and changing the clocks on the wall to be exactly where they were when the water would breach like the holes and shit. And I mean, that's not something you would ever notice, but like, it was very important to him.
The fact that it's there, it's like, I always call this kind of stuff, it's the golf swing, right? You have to keep swinging the club after you hit the ball.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The ball doesn't see where that club is going afterwards, but if you stop swinging, you are going to slow down.
Yeah.
Before you hit the ball. It matters that you keep that upswing.
And maybe that's the thing too that I notice with like a lot of these shots of, because you know, the ships, they begin to, you know, capsize and turn over in a lot of cases.
Yep.
I found it very confusing as to like which boat we're looking at now and things like that. Whereas again, in a James Cameron version of this, not to be like James Cameron is the greatest filmmaker of all time, because he's not, but he minds the details. And
no, I mean, he's pretty good. I mean, the thing is like, he's a very good
Chapo Trap House. We do not have the same opinion on James Cameron.
I think Titanic rules, frankly.
But this is the thing, right? Is that you have those indicators, you have those signals, the things like the clock, the things like we've already been through this area, we've been through these hallways, we've been at this grand staircase, so we know where we are in space.
Right.
Nothing like that exists in this movie to give us a frame of reference. And so instead, it's just always like, we are just looking at another thing.
Yeah,
which
it's
makes
just another explosion.
Which makes it even more crazy when the movie starts to just replicate shots from Titanic.
Yeah, and expects you to feel the same thing because you remember the Titanic movie.
With boats that sink in a very different way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, because like the real danger with capsizing in general, we saw that with that horrible ferry tragedy in Korea a few years ago.
The Sewol ferry, I believe.
You have the people inside the boat. And all of a sudden you can't get out anymore because you have literal tons of water on your doors and hatches. You cannot get out of there.
Yeah, you can't open the doors.
Which is also what happened to the USS Arizona.
Exactly.
Right. They also introduce a dog.
Yeah, again, if you have the dog earlier, then we care about the dog.
We see him briefly.
I totally missed the dog.
Yeah, no, there's a
rescue a dog like towards the end of this. Yeah,
no, they don't.
Yeah,
they do.
Yeah, the dog survives. The dog lives in Pearl Harbor. The dog survives.
Appears and then that's it.
And then
It's
survives.
that dog.
Yeah, it's that dog I know. If you set the thing just on the boat and you get to know everybody that's on the boat, and then you sink that boat, you're going to have a much more of a personal connection to the tragedy than if you spend all your time on the mainland and then oops, the ships are sinking and it's like, okay, I guess, but like, I don't care. Like, I don't know. I mean, historically, it's a very tragic event, but in the form of this movie, who cares?
Or you could do the thing of have the big set piece with the ship sinking and then show all of these people coming into the hospital. So you have a couple different people who you know from the ships.
You already have it. You already have the thing. They've already got it and they don't trust it.
It's there. They don't trust it. And Michael Bay's just like, well, I don't want to. But by the way, I will say, even though she's going through hell and back, Kate Beckinsale's hair in the hospital continues to look fantastic. Flawless stays winning.
It is funny because in the grime and muck of it, when her nurse uniform is like completely drenched in dried blood, finally Michael Bay is like, oh, I see why you're hot. And does this weird glamour shot where she turns around to welcome Ben Affleck into the hospital.
Weird
and
shit.
it's like this slow-mo, like sexy moment. And I'm like, come on, man.
Speaking of weird glamour shots, that one blonde girl, she's dead now.
Yeah, that's right. She fucking dies.
They're hauling bodies outside the
Betty's
hospital.
gone.
And there we see her corpse, and we
Betty
get all these
booped.
like lingering close-ups of her, and it's just like, that's the thing. Also Red and his stutter, right? So now he's lost his fiance, and he but when the attack is going on, of course, everyone is still taken by surprise. It's still just Sunday morning, and he runs in and he can't get the words
out to yell that they're being attacked, so they're even more surprised.
Yeah.
What a great arc for him.
Yeah.
I'm really glad. I'm really glad he was
the thing that they did there.
I'm really glad he was in the movie, and not based on a real guy.
They made him Cassandra.
So the battle is over, and
we've actually recapped the battle in less time than the actual battle sequence takes place.
Yeah, but I mean,
usually we take longer than the thing that we watch.
Well, because there's shit that we can talk about.
Yeah, we've got bits.
There's nothing to talk about here. We keep doing bits if that's what you want. Do you want that? Do you want that? Do you just want us to keep doing bits? Is that what you fucking want? Is that what I am to you?
Josh, don't yell at them. They know not what they do.
Josh has been going through it lately. The thing is, this time of year rolls around, it's always really hard for him.
We made him watch Minions and How I Met Your Mother back to back.
But also, Josh has Pearl Harbor Day is just really hard for Josh, as it is for all of us.
As it is for all Americans. But you know what? Here's the thing.
Not just Americans. Everyone.
The world, really.
Everybody.
Because here's the thing. We took a major L on Pearl Harbor. Like, the U.S., major loss. But at least we got them back with the totally real and effective plan called the Doolittle plan.
It is real.
Yeah,
but
it's not really as depicted. The thing is, it's kind of depicted the way that history teaches it.
Right.
In that it was a propaganda fight.
Yes.
It was not necessarily a strategic win of any kind. It was a little bit insane. Doolittle presumed that he was going to be court-martialed. And yet.
As opposed to, obviously, the attack on Pearl Harbor, which was obviously a propaganda victory for the Axis, but also was a massive strategic success. It decimated the Pacific
because
fleet.
Japan was trying to do more aggression to the Philippines, and we were colonizing the Philippines and Guam and stuff.
Which was part of what happened was we were so convinced that the attack would happen on Manila or on Guam, and instead it happened at Pearl Harbor.
It was kind of preemptive in a sense. Like, that's what they were going for. Like, they destroyed the military targets. The third wave was even going to go after fuel reserves because they wanted us to be set back in our fight against Japan. Which, that's what happened, except then we were actually fighting.
Right.
Yeah. Then we entered the war.
But and the Doolittle raid is very soon after, because we were using, as the movie shows, the meager resources at our disposal to be able to carry it out. And they're like, this was the turning point in the war. This was fucking February. It was like 3 months, 2 or 3 months later.
But it points to, and I keep coming back to this, like, Michael Bay's conception of history. He does not have a materialist conception of history.
Conception of history. Sure. Because Braveheart is almost the exact same fucking way, right?
Yeah, Braveheart is fully mythological. I mean, no one wore kilts at that point in time in Scotland. William Wallace wore a suit of armor and had a big mustache.
Sure as fuck wasn't Australian
He
Mel
wasn't
Gibson.
Spreading woad on his face like he was Merlin and Bonduca.
Nor leaving specific voicemails on his daughter's answering machine.
Wife, Alec Baldwin is the daughter. Speaking of
Alec Baldwin.
There we go. He's back. He's back.
Okay.
You miss him? He's back.
Okay, so here's the thing about Alec Baldwin in this movie. It kind of seems like he's doing like Jack Donaghy acting a little bit.
I disagree. I think he's just doing his thing from Glengarry again. It's more that.
This was kind of low point Alec Baldwin too, like in his personal life. Like, he was in, one of the many. He's in bad shape. It's funny though, because like Doolittle is the ultimate maverick here. It's weird that they had him as the stuffy old dean in the first scene where he's like, you're too much of a maverick, when he's like, we're going to do a suicide mission now.
Sorry, before the suicide mission, everything gets basically resolved with the love triangle immediately after.
Yeah, they just kind of write it all, and it's like, yep, they're good now.
Oh, yeah, so they talked to the two guys, the Fly Boys. They got up there, our Rafe and our Danny, and they're like, you're the only guys with fighting experience.
Yeah.
We need you to do this because we don't have enough fighters. But, like, these guys they're fighter pilots. They do single-engine planes, and they're asking these guys to fly bombers, multi-engine bombers.
Right.
It's an entirely different kind of flying.
Absolutely.
Altogether.
It's an entirely different kind of flying. Something that I wanted to mention, though, before we actually get to talking about the Doolittle raid, is just to clear what this movie tries to then do with Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
It's not happy to have that be the end.
No.
Right? And as you were saying, Brian, the story of Pearl Harbor is that of American failure. It is that of, American naivete being shattered by a single event that would change everything forever.
Yeah. Interesting.
And I think
in this movie, released in May of 2001.
Yeah.
Released in May, like a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
Like a fucking... Like, that's because it's Michael Bay.
Yeah,
it's a Michael Bay movie. Yeah. It's not released like Titanic.
This is from National Geographic from December 4, 2016. It's an interview with an author named Steve TWOAPW, a historian. He wrote a book called Countdown to Pearl Harbor, The 12 Days to the Attack. So if people are interested in learning about what actually fucking happened. So the interviewer asks the question, a preventable catastrophe caused by incompetent leadership, racist stereotypes, and an arrogant belief in the invincibility of the United States. Is that a fair assessment of Pearl Harbor? And TWOAPW says, that's extremely fair. I use the phrase assumption fathered defeat. And it did on many levels, both big and small. All through 1941, there were newspaper articles touting the superiority of the United States Navy. There was also an assumption in Washington that the Pacific Fleet had been alerted and was ready, which wasn't the case.
Right.
It goes all the way up to the racial assumptions about the potential ability of the adversary. From big things to small things, America was complacent about where things stood on December 7. If you read the American magazines and newspapers in 1941, it's amazing how the Japanese were considered a funny, curious people who were technologically inept. They were supposedly physiologically incapable of being good aviators because they lacked the sense of balance and their eyes were not right. It was even believed that the Japanese were bad pilots because as babies, they would be carried on the backs of their big sisters and got bounced around so their inner ear was knocked askew. So just like
what the fuck?
But again, what were the things that we were told in the run up to 9/11?
Yeah.
Right.
Things that were propagated, I think, in some ways by the corollary to what this movie was telling us. That like it wasn't necessarily a failure of America, right? There were good guys.
Yeah.
There were the Dan Aykroyds of the world who knew exactly what was going on.
There was FDR too, actually.
Yeah,
the way
that's what Roosevelt
the way
knew.
Roosevelt was like, you gotta watch out for the Japanese, and it was just like,
this is why, like, going into the Doolittle raid, this is the world that Bay creates for us. It's a world where we were almost there. We were so fucking close. And if just one more comm had gone through, we would have gotten it. We were so close. And that's just not fucking true.
And I feel like that's like the myth making of it is like, well, if the U.S. had just had enough conscience to enter the war already, to just start fighting the Krauts, and then, of course, they'd have to go west, too, because that's also going on at the same time. Like, if we just had the conscience and understanding that we needed to be the guys, then we could have done it. We could have made it into this war.
Which is a very hindsight view to take. I mean, for a lot of reasons.
It's Monday morning quarterbacking.
But it's also just like, because a lot of the elites of America agreed with Hitler.
Yeah.
Right? So like...
Yeah, you ever hear about a guy named Henry Ford?
Yeah, like Jesus Christ. Like in this movie, it actually almost makes it explicit that FDR wanted the Doolittle raid to happen. He wanted it to happen so bad, he cured his polio.
That's right.
And fully stood.
Which, you know, for
out
me,
of his wheelchair.
Which for me, I found super inspiring. Again,
oh, good.
Yeah.
You know,
don't you tell me what's impossible.
I love when my, illness, when my disability is like used as a crucible for character growth and human understanding.
Yeah, isn't that fun?
Well, here's the thing. I'm a lot more attuned to the world and frankly important than either of you.
That's true.
Because I've just been through more suffering.
Josh
That's how it
loves
works.
seeing a disabled Dutch man stand up and say, this is what we're going to do.
That's right, Brian.
The dad is a perfect encapsulation of how Americans actually thought. We're not going to have a fucking war.
Right.
We
the
got
dad
into
from the very
first,
beginning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got into the First World
The
War.
linchpin of this whole movie turns out the
Well,
dad in the
it's
first scene.
It's like almost sharp writing, except they never go back to it, right?
Right.
It's just like we went into World War I. We won. We don't have like the narrative of defeat,
Right.
but it was like
World War I, you mean, yeah.
Yeah, and a bunch of people fucking died. Let's not. We don't
Right.
want to be involved in world affairs anymore.
Right.
But of course, we still had our whole like westward expansion must continue to the islands now.
Yeah, the Monroe Doctrine. We can't leave South America alone.
And like a lot of that came from the USS Maine exploding
Right.
under suspicious circumstances that probably were not because of any enemy combatants from Spain. So what we needed to get into World War II was another USS Maine.
Yes.
Right.
And the Japanese delivered it.
Yeah.
They delivered a real USS Maine.
Yes. As opposed to, I don't know, perhaps something from the We Were Soldiers. The Gulf of Tonkin.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. We this didn't even have to be manufactured.
Right.
Right.
And to what degree was some stuff deliberately ignored? There might be something to say about that.
Sure.
There's not a whole lot of Pearl Harbor. I was actually looking it up last night because I was like, I wonder if there are a lot of Pearl Harbor conspiracy
Pearl Harbor
theories.
truthers.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I didn't find much, but I wonder if there were maybe some.
Well, that's because this movie came out and proved them all wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I wonder if there were maybe some contemporaries at the time who thought it was bullshit. But of course, mostly like Americans went from overwhelmingly being completely against any military involvement in this to being entirely
it
in
flipped
favor.
overnight.
Right?
Yeah.
This was we got attacked on our territorial soil.
Right.
Yep. They called up Mel Blanc and were like, listen, we got a lot of stuff you got to record. We got to sell those fucking bonds, man.
So I want to get more to like the big picture parallels and the 9/11 stuff a little later.
Okay.
I think now is a great time to get back into the Doolittle shit.
Yes.
And really
Animals talking.
Yeah. Well, that was really cool. When they loaded up the plane with a bunch of animals who all had silly voices.
Hugh Jackman, Rex Harrison, and Eddie Murphy.
All at once?
All the Doolittles.
No, that's not. No, it's Robert Downey Jr.
What?
Robert Downey Jr. was Doolittle.
Why did I think it was Hugh Jackman?
I also thought it
No,
was
it's not Hugh Jackman. No, it's Robert
Hugh
Downey
Jackman
Jr.
did the Peter Pan thing. That's
Yes,
what I'm
he did
thinking of.
Hook, yeah.
Okay.
No,
He
not
played
Hook. Pan.
No, he did Pan, but he played Hook.
There we go. Yeah.
You go left, we go left. Right. You go right, left.
I'm
I don't know who's on third.
I'm panning this conversation. I give it 0 stars.
Yeah.
So
now again, because everyone's friends, they all get to go to the Doolittle raid together.
Yeah.
yes, and as presented by this movie, the Doolittle raid was the end of Top Gun Maverick.
Yes.
Right. Like
No, it's exactly the same. Yeah.
Yep. It's like you don't have enough fuel.
It's the end of Top Gun Maverick. It's the trench run from Star Wars.
It does a bullshit job setting it up. By this point, I have to be honest. From the Doolittle raid on, this movie is white noise for me.
I was totally checked out.
Yeah,
Sure.
no,
I mean,
it was really hard to like get a grip on what was even happening scene to scene.
And they make the Doolittle raid sort of parallel to Pearl Harbor, right? They show these guys flying over Japan in the same way that they show the Japanese fighters flying over America.
Right.
And they didn't move in formation. It was all kind of like one plane went over here, one plane. It was fully covert operations, right?
Because
with the
again,
intent that they were going to crash in China.
The idea being, as set up, they would all fly the planes over Tokyo. They would knock out a couple logistical things with bombs. And then, the planes would land in China because at that point, China was still aligned with the United States.
Right. A lot of it was occupied by Japan, which is where we ran into trouble.
Right.
But if you could get like west enough, you could hopefully land in a part of China that was still in active resistance. And something that I feel like they should have included in this movie, it doesn't go against their sensibility, is that they actually had special jackets made for this raid with Chinese writing on them.
Oh,
saying
interesting.
We are American soldiers looking for shelter or something like that.
They teach them that phrase in Mandarin that's
it
like...
says I'm an American soldier or something.
Yeah.
Alec Baldwin gives like 3 consecutive brilliant speeches.
Yes.
Yeah, he's really got to inspire
It's
them.
like Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2, and Henry V.
He gives one
This is his
speech
Henry ad.
to the pilots. He gives another speech to just a guy who's on the bridge with him.
Yeah.
And then he gives another speech to the pilots.
Yeah. There's so much in this movie that I am not like an editor of film, of narrative film.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting there going, I mean, you could hack half this shit off this movie.
Yeah.
And you'd lose nothing.
But I think part of the marketing, again, to make it like Titanic, is it had to be 3 hours long.
Right.
So they just had to keep filling it up and not cutting things.
Yeah.
Titanic, but that again, it's like Titanic is not a movie that has filler in it.
No.
It zooms. It flies, Titanic does, because it came on those two VHSs,
right.
like the box set VHSs. And I think Pearl Harbor did too.
Oh, probably. Yeah, The King and I, Fiddler on the Roof, they're all those... The sound of music.
Yeah. But like my sister growing up thought that The Sound of Music was done after the first tape. And it was like, wait, so she's married and that's it? This is a weird ending.
The Sound of Music is done after the first tape.
I was always a second tape kid, except for Fiddler. I thought Fiddler's first half was better, but because of The King and I and The Sound of Music, King and I, you had the big theatrical spectacle in the second act,
right?
And The Sound of Music, you had the marionette puppets. So I always played the second tape.
Sure.
Oh, sure.
On its own.
So yeah, I mean, this is second tape material, but like, I don't think anybody put this second tape in.
No, man. I mean, God help if they put in the first tape.
All of the tapes should be burned.
Yeah. No more tapes.
But you know what? This movie, it's tape.
Yep.
It's tape.
Yeah, the Doolittle raid happens. And then we have this. Do we need anything more of this?
Not really.
The romance is also still burning.
That's right. It is.
This weird scene with Kate Beckinsale reading like voiceover. You're right. It's like Ben Affleck's reading a letter and it's her voiceover, but it's too quiet.
Right.
And then he throws it in the fire and it gets quieter.
That's really
so weird. And then she's like doing weird stuff where she's like, I need to be in the fucking command center.
She's got to be in the room where it happens.
But also, it was so fucking obvious that, spoiler alert for Pearl Harbor, Ben Affleck was going to survive and Josh Hartnett was going to die. Like, they telegraphed that from so fucking far away.
Yeah. And honestly, it does suck to see Josh Hartnett die because he is one of the best parts of this movie.
Yeah.
But
Not that he has much competition.
No, but they do. I mean, he literally, they put his arms in like a yoke, like around his neck, and then he dies like the crucified Christ.
Yep.
Yes, by the way, this is just something I wanted to know. They do the mission, they fly, they get the bombings off, they fly west toward China, they crash land in a rice paddy.
Which again, every single plane in the Doolittle raid crash landed except for one that landed in Vladivostok in the USSR.
But Josh Hartnett and Ben Affleck, on the other hand, again, they crash into this rice paddy in China and are immediately intercepted by Japanese soldiers.
Immediately, yeah.
But you know what? At least as they're crash landing, we get a cut to see what President Roosevelt is up to.
Yeah.
And he delivers the following line.
Oh, here we go.
So our boys are flying blind on empty tanks. God help them.
Just in case you forgot what the stakes were, even though they've spelled out multiple times that they don't have enough
over again
fuel in the tanks, they have to unload shit to like make the planes lighter.
Yeah. Like I mean, this movie does not trust you to think for a second, I don't think. And it doesn't want you to.
And I turned my brain off, so, more power to them.
Honestly, and so then, they crash land, and then, like,
Rambo 2 happens.
Hartnett's still alive, and he looks like he's dying, but then he's actually not because then they're just gonna kill him anyway.
So
like,
he's being crucified like the Christ himself. Ben Affleck pulls out his sidearm and administers punishment to like four guys.
This is where we go Rambo again.
Ben Affleck and Josh Hartnett in this movie have more chemistry than either of them do with Kate Beckinsale. So this moment where he's actually like crying over his friend, I thought was very interesting because Josh Hartnett was not allowed to cry over Ben Affleck's death.
Yeah,
but Ben Affleck gets the big Oscar. I'm screaming at God.
And then he gets to have the scene. It's like, no, man, she's having your baby.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what we were building to this whole
Ben Affleck
time.
is having Josh Hartnett's baby.
Ben Affleck's gonna raise,
It's also
fine.
definitely that thing of like before the shot, he had to like stand there with his eyes just wide open for 2 minutes to get a little bit of tear going. And then like had to stay there. So
he had to do the thing that a character in the movie does where he fakes crying.
Oh my God, insane. Josh Hartnett is dead. Ben Affleck is alive, but empty inside. But here's the thing that I wanted to point out. You know who really suffered a lot of casualties as a result of this specific incursion?
My mental health.
And the things that it then led to in terms of Japanese retaliation? Chinese civilians.
Yeah. This led to like hundreds of thousands of deaths as an immediate and deliberate retaliation for the Doolittle raid.
Yes.
It's just like, we can't take them to the east. We're going to go west.
Eventually culminating in the rape of Nanking. So there you go.
Jesus Christ. And you know what? At least it's handled with like the respect and dignity it deserves at the hands of Michael Bay.
Yeah,
oh
right.
no, fuck that. We're just going to show like American flags waving dramatically. Ben Affleck gets to return home and he and Kate Beckinsale like settle down in Tennessee again, where they build this garish ass marble tombstone in the middle of a field. That tombstone looks like it costs more than their fucking house. And it's just out, I guess, on the lawn. And they, oh, you know what? I think we got to teach that little boy, that little boy named after his father, Danny, his dead dad. We got to teach him how to fly. So we end the film with flying into the sky in a crop duster, the Top Gun orange sunset taking us home.
Magic hour, and that's it. That's the movie. I mean,
and then Faith Hill sings one of the worst songs I've ever heard in my goddamn life.
It's not as bad as the song at the end of Heart Condition.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what song was really bad? The song from Avatar.
Yeah,
do you even remember the
bad.
Avatar song? No. She even includes the line "I see you" in the lyrics. It's great.
Oh God! But like,
it's my favorite episode of BoJack.
There's something so wild about the fact that Josh Hartnett, then his death becomes what the whole movie hangs its hat on.
Yeah.
Here's this guy. Didn't you care about him so much? Didn't you? Didn't you?
Somebody had to.
And again, meanwhile,
Josh Hartnett's mom really got into that character.
And meanwhile, the Doolittle raid, the results of that and other U.S. covert operations leading to the, again, it's not America's fault, quote unquote, but like, because of these things, there was further collateral damage.
It was an insane decision. They did a suicide mission for the sake of propaganda. It's always going to be debatable how effective that really is.
But also, like, again, if you want to focus on the real human cost, which I think you should, it shouldn't be fucking this imaginary character who isn't a real guy. It should be the people who actually died at the hands of the Imperial Army.
You have so many real people involved in all this.
There's not a single Chinese person in this fucking movie.
Not one. They don't exist. Like, we don't even know what happens to Ben Affleck after he just killed a bunch of Japanese soldiers in an area that they were apparently patrolling. Immediately, he's just returned back home, right? Some guys did get captured. There was I think one plane worth of people who died. Most people landed in friendly territory and made their way back home.
Right.
But like, there's no sense of that. It's just like, well, I shot 5 Japanese guys and now I'm back in the continental U.S. with Kate Beckinsale.
Yep. And our new son, who named Danny after my dead friend.
And we've got like voiceover, but it's not at the very end. So it's like, ooh, because we can't just have a disaster in the United States. We have to find a way to jerk ourselves off over it, right?
Yeah.
If it's World War I, which was so meaningless that Americans were suddenly like anti-war,
right?
Like, we have to be like, yeah, but we ended it. We saved everyone.
Right. Yeah,
like, every single time we have to find something to stick our dick into.
Yeah.
And if not, we're going to buy a pair of rubber buns.
Yeah. And if we
and a bottle of liquor.
And if we are attacked, we retaliate tenfold.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Like, I can't imagine that the decision to drop the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was not at least a little informed by the fact that we were embarrassed at Pearl Harbor.
Yes,
100%.
I mean, first of all, those are fucking war crimes.
Of course.
You know, in a way.
And the fact that war crimes were committed by the Japanese empire does not excuse war crimes committed by the United States, particularly when that war crime was dropping the first fucking nuclear bomb. Like,
and then a second one.
Yeah.
But I think another interesting thing in terms of like narratives is just, we've talked about this a bit, but like the Disneyfication of history, you know?
Yes.
In my research for this episode, I found an article called Disney's Pearl Harbor, National Memory at the Movies by an author named Jeffrey M. White. This was published in The Public Historian in fall 2002.
Nice.
And he goes in and he sort of talks a bit about all of the different components of, you know, how this thing got made and sort of the different framings of what it is. He talks a bit about the historical inaccuracies of it and how, you know, ultimately they didn't focus first and foremost on pleasing the actual living memory of the event. Like, they did a big thing where they like had an event at Pearl Harbor and invited a bunch of vets.
Yeah,
but it was more for the sake of the photo op and being like,
it was free publicity for Disney, where they probably did it on like federal taxpayer dime.
I just want to read a little bit from this. Despite its status as a love story and its expanded timeline, beginning with the air war over Britain and ending with the Doolittle raid on Japan, the Disney film reproduces the dominant structure of the Pearl Harbor story as it has been told through the last 60 years. Following a canonical form for a heroic narrative, the larger-than-life story of Pearl Harbor begins with a state of innocence in romantic Hawaii, which is then disrupted by a devastating sneak attack, followed by collective efforts to fight back, setting the stage for ultimate victory. As is the case with a number of momentous events or turning points in American history, most recently September 11, because again, this was published in 2004, Pearl Harbor is usually characterized as an end to innocence. The theme of innocence, which the Disney company is uniquely suited to produce, is evident in most Pearl Harbor films, documentary feature, and was said by the scriptwriter for Pearl Harbor to be the overriding trope for his script.
Hence that poor woman in her laundry.
Yeah, it goes on to say exactly that. Certainly it was emblazoned in the promotional clips circulated prior to the release of the film as images of a massive attack squadron swooping low over American civilians playing baseball or hanging out laundry.
Oh my God.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So like...
I'm an academic, guys.
So I think that's really, the biggest thing that I kind of took away from this was about that thing, about the innocence and about how this movie wants to portray America as just, we're just baby. We're just little babies.
I'm just a baby. Yeah.
I'm the tiniest US citizen.
It's also interesting the way that like the Navy specifically latches onto this, because this is the only like time that the Navy is consequential in a way that like you can completely play positively, right? The World War II is the point where the U.S. Navy actually matters.
But also, you know what? If you're going to be honest about the historical record, you can't portray them positively at all because they fucked up so colossally.
You can portray them positively later, maybe.
Sure.
Here, no.
Well, but it's also, I think it's so fascinating because this film just does not work. And it seems like most movies that are made by Americans about events where Americans took a major L, don't work. Like 9/11 had a shit ton of movies made about it. Nick Cage played a firefighter, I think, in one of them.
Charlie Sheen was in an elevator in another one.
Yeah, it's just bad. Like they're not good narrative films because they don't trust them to end on just the actual feeling these events evoke in people.
I think it's that narratively, but I also think it kind of needs to end in the disaster, and the disaster needs to anchor character moments from before.
Right.
But it's also that, frankly, if you want to be honest on a higher level about why 9/11 happened, it's not like it just came out of nowhere.
No.
It's not in the same way that Pearl Harbor didn't just come out of nowhere. There was missed intelligence, there were proximate causes, and there were a lot of things that led to that event happening. It just wasn't an isolated thing that just happened to occur.
And I think the thing that really fascinates me is that, of course, 9/11 happens just a few months later.
Right.
Yeah.
George Bush goes on screen and says, "Day that will live in infamy." We get all the parallels drawn. And this movie's presence in all of that is basically nothing. Maybe it got some more rentals at Blockbusters, more people bought it at Walmart.
DVD sales did spike,
but like the cultural cash, they didn't use like clips of this movie to sell us on anything.
Yeah, nobody remembers this movie.
The movie was not really seen as good.
Right.
It helped the movie's sales, but the movie's sales did not necessarily help our new propaganda efforts to begin this like war on terror and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just so bad that it couldn't actually live up to it, and it didn't need to propagandize us on Pearl Harbor because the American education system had already done it.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. I mean, one of the things that it did do, I guess, the release of this movie, and this again is just quoting from that article from Jeffrey White. It goes on and it talks about the way that like so much of it is basically imagined. And I think this is an interesting thing here. Historian Mike Wallace worries that the histories presented in highly corporatized spaces, interested more in consumer satisfaction than education, are likely to be more historicidal than historical. In part, this is because they're reluctant to challenge or disturb reigning views of the past.
Historicidal in that it's like killing
history.
That's interesting. I really like that term.
And was Pearl Harbor kind of a bust? Did people not really care about it? Like, yeah, kind of. But also, what it maybe also did on some level was it killed interest in the history of what could have really happened in favor of this corporatized, sanitized narrative. And so you don't ask those questions when you come away from this movie because, like I was saying earlier, the movie's not interested in the questions to begin with.
Well, that idea of historicide too. From Hell ends with this appendix, right? From Hell is like about Jack the Ripper, and it takes the most circuitous, bizarre, all-encompassing conspiracy theory around Jack the Ripper to tie everything together. But the appendix of it ends with talking about Ripperologists, how every couple of years there's another person who has figured out who it is. Right. You know, oh, it's actually William Gull. Oh, it's actually Aleister Crowley. Oh, it's actually this painter. Oh, it's actually the guy who became the Boston Strangler or something like that. Oh. And because of that, he uses this image of people trying to catch gulls, because William Withy Gull, gull catcher is a Shakespearean word for someone who is a dumbass and easily fooled.
Sure.
He has all of these people with big nets trying to catch a seagull on the beach.
Oh, interesting.
The real seagull was on the beach before, but now it's flying overhead, and now the sand is completely disrupted, and it's just footprints of 1,000 people.
That's so...
And the fact that people continue to do this, continue to make myths, makes the history even more impossible to ever figure out.
Yes. Right. Yeah, and in the White article, the Jeffrey White article, he talks about how so many more people have gone to the USS Arizona Memorial as a result of this. It's kind of similar, right? It's like people who want to go back to the place, who want to maybe reenact the thing or like try to relive the experience. But there's a disconnect between the experience and trying to get around the aesthetic, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
And getting to the core of what the thing is. Why did it happen? From a material perspective, what were the proximate causes?
Well, it's weaponizing history too, right?
Yeah.
All Bay is really interested in is how America fought back, and that this was the catalyst that then led to such an epic win for America.
Right.
Like we won World War II. It was like, you know, it was the big crowning jewel that we've been kind of coasting on pretty much ever since.
Yeah. It's our defining feature since 1945.
And I think what Bay taps into here, which I think is very interesting because 9/11 happens a couple months later, is that there is already an American desire to want to be the victim who rises up to destroy a great enemy.
Yeah.
And that was present long before the two towers fell.
Oh, yeah.
In Team America World Police.
Oh, God.
There's a song called The End of an Act, where the protagonist, Gary, sings about how much he misses his ex-love, like Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor missed the point. What's the point of Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor?
I think it's that you can be a cool guy and you can fly planes and go, phew, and then sometimes you can even find a hot lady and have sex with her in a parachute.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. I think he just wanted to make money. I think that's the ultimate thing here is like Michael Bay just on background like loves America because you see that in all of his movies, including fucking Transformers.
This is strictly on background though. This is purely confidential. Yeah. This wasn't sourced from anywhere in particular.
But like, you know, he loves America and all this stuff, but like he doesn't make a movie with a goal. I think primarily he wants to make money.
Well, I think the other thing too is that what I think is very telling is that even the new Transformers movies, Michael Bay sure loves China too because they're giving him a shit ton of money. He goes where the money is.
Absolutely.
And I want to read a quote from him. He was on the set of Bad Boys, and he and Martin Lawrence were not getting along. Tale as old as time. Martin Lawrence, I thought Bay was like an upstart know-it-all who didn't understand anything about him, and Michael Bay was just like trying to get him to look good. So he pulled him aside one day, and here's the quote. Eventually, I took Martin Lawrence aside and said, "Dude, what's your deal? I'm busting my ass to make you look good, make you look funny, and you just keep belittling me." And then here's the speech, almost like it was ready to come out. He says, "I'm a black man that made it from nothing." And I said, "You know what? I'm a white guy who made it from nothing too.
Let's go, dude.
I grew up in the fucking valley." Instant respect.
I'm sure that's exactly what happened. And then everybody clapped.
I grew up in the valley? You don't get respect from anyone for that.
I know. But I think that's all it is, man. The man is just that's the question he ultimately wants to ask is how much are you going to put on my paycheck?
Yeah. Which, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to pay us, you can. You know, we have a Patreon. It's $5 a month or more if you really want to give us money. Patreon.com/worstofall gives you access to a whole bunch of episodes in our back catalog. Yeah. It's awesome. Check it out if you want. Brian, you have some thoughts to close this episode, don't you?
So I went to Hawaii in 1999. I think there was like a dental convention or some shit like that. And we decided like, oh, we'll just bring like both my grandparents on my mom's side, my grandma on my dad's side. My grandpa on my dad's side had already passed away, but my grandpop, my mom's dad, had fought in the Pacific Theater, and he was stationed in Oahu just after Pearl Harbor, right when he got drafted. And so we went there with him and walked around and saw things, and eventually went to the memorial. And he talked about like how last time he saw Waikiki Beach, it was covered in barbed wire.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And they just have this. It's sort of like a floating memorial, right? It's just this big white thing, and it's very pretty and it's very clean. While they just tell you all of the horrible things about the details of it all, and they have names written on the feature. But it's the cleanliness of it and the stateliness of it. It makes it again part of our whole victory narrative, and that was the first time I'd ever seen my own grandfather cry.
Wow.
And I think that's the big thing about these stories like that is if you talk to the people who were actually there, who are all gone now, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to tell you that it's good, that it's victorious, that it's heroic.
Right.
They saw horrible things and always, until they died, knew that what they saw was horrible. And we have to understand that when we talk about history, the perspectives of the people who lived history have to make their way in. So I hope that that's what you draw from all of this when we talk about this absolute piece of fucking dog shit made for money.
And when we talk about Pearl Harbor next year.
Oh, God.
I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
And I'm the worst of all possible Joshes. See you next week.